Test.
Hey, man. Got 1 minute. Then we're legal.
Do we have Boy Scouts here tonight? Yes, ma'am. What I figured. Boy Scouts.
Okay, the City Council of the City of Rollingwood comes to order at 7 o'clock, and we'll call the roll. Amy Patillo,
Here.
Wendy Hunley, absent. Buck Shapiro, absent. Sarah Hudson,
Here.
Gavin Massengill here. Mayor Mike Dyson is not present this evening. All right, with that, we will call up public comments. Does anyone here wishing to testify on anything not on the agenda this evening? Ashley?
No, sir.
All right, and we will move on to presentations. I'll call up agenda item number 2, presentation from Chief Wilson regarding the Travis County ESD number 9 needs assessment and discussion regarding enhanced presence of EMS and fire services in Rollingwood. Chief, welcome this evening.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, council, city administrator, community here. It's okay to take these off for y'all. David Wilson, I'm the fire chief with Travis County Emergency Service District number 9, so also known as the Westlake Fire Department. We provide fire services to City of Rollingwood, City of Westlake Hills, and Western Travis County. And just wanted to briefly introduce myself. I haven't met all the council members. So again, I'm David Wilson. Been with the fire department since full-time since 1997. So next year will be my 25th year with the department. Came up the ranks and was appointed fire chief in 2019 when some of the strategic planning initiatives started. When we put those in with our Board of Commissioners. So just briefly wanted to review those with you all this morning, and again, thank you for the time and opportunity. Just again, a quick summary about the department. So we're governed by 5 Board of Commissioners, much like a city council that we report to. The fire department has 2 fire stations strategically located to provide service. We're on Loop 360, and then at Redbud and Stratford and Westlake Hills. That we're there. We have an authorized force of 35 personnel. With our part-time and EMS coordinators, we're about a staff of 45 that serve the community. We operate with a budget that's from property taxes and sales tax. Sales tax is just collected in the county area, so we don't collect any sales tax within City of Rollingwood or City of Westlake Hills. So that's how we're funded with our property tax. And this year we are at 0814 for our tax assessment. But I'd sent over a brief summary that's been added to the packet for some of the strategic planning initiatives that we started in 2019. And really one of the goals when I became chief was to look at our district analysis, or look at our fire district and kind of analyze our best response that we have. And we looked at all of ESD 9 and the service as a whole. and have provided an executive summary to the council to review within their packet. Some of the response time initiatives, just so you're aware, is the arrival of the first unit within 8 minutes and 15 seconds. So that's something we strive for. That response time is figured from the time the caller calls 911 until the first unit arrives on scene from the fire department. So it's from 911 call to travel time, and also includes our turnout time. So we want to have an average of 6 minutes and 30 seconds, average response time. And then our turnout time, so by the time the firefighters receive the tone at the fire station until they leave, we want them on the road within 1 minute and 15 seconds. And then travel time, which is one of the hardest things to meet, is 5 minutes from our fire stations to our destination. As you all know, the traffic in the area can be congested, and our roadway network is very hilly. We don't have a grid within the west side of Travis County, and so it's a challenge to meet some of the travel time initiatives of 5 minutes. So really that's what we looked at, and we found two response items and one internal recommendation that was presented to our Board of Commissioners. And one of the primary challenges that we did find was the Rollingwood area. And so it includes the city of Rollingwood, and then some of the area along Bee Caves Road that feeds into Westlake Hills. So we kind of clumped the Rollingwood area into that. What we found is the Rollingwood area is a bit of a challenge to get to from our fire stations. We have great response time on fire incidents. We utilize automatic aid within Travis County, so the closest unit, regardless of jurisdiction, responds. So a lot of the responses are handled by the Austin Fire Department Station 32, which is off of Montebello Road. One of the things within that automatic aid is they don't respond to lower priority calls, and that's really where we see some of our response deficiencies that we're trying to look at ways to address within the community. It's lower priority medical calls. These could be like a fall. These are fire alarm activations, so maybe your smoke alarm's going off, you have a burglar alarm, and that's sending the fire department. So those are the type of calls that we're responding to and kind of struggling to meet. And then the other one was an additional fire station west of 360, so that doesn't, it does affect the Rollingwood area because it adds depth of service, just like an additional unit in the area would. It adds depth of service to not only Rollingwood, but Westlake Hills and Western Travis County, where we all respond within the ESD. The next page was looking at our time of day and day a week. So one of the unique things with Rollingwood is we found that the majority of our incidents were during almost business hours. So we're kind of on a bell curve. So we're running kind of that 7 o'clock which is rush hour, to the 7 p.m. So that's one of the recommendations, was that if we look at doing a unit in the Rollingwood area, that we would be looking at a demand unit, a unit that would be responding to the highest time of emergencies for those. And we respond to about 200 calls, 200 incidents within the city each year. And so about 60 of those were responded to by Austin Fire Department, and the remainder were responded to by an ESD 9 unit. So within looking at our response time analysis, what we're finding is really the core of City of Rollingwood down into the area around Bee Caves and Mopac are kind of our biggest challenges. And so some of the things we're looking at to improve response times are placing a demand unit in somewhere in the city, whether that's along the Bee Caves corridor or as we've been looking at and exploring if there's opportunities to do something with the City of Rollingwood if something progresses in the future for a redesign or something here at the site of City Hall. So those are the few things that I wanted to highlight. Overall, the response times are great. with our fire incidents, but again, it's our lower priority medical calls that we're really wanting to focus on. The unit we're looking at in Rollingwood is a squad-based unit, so it's a two-person crew that would respond to medical calls as first response quickly and be able to mitigate the incident until the other units arrive. But that's really what I have for you all this morning, or this evening, is to to highlight some of those incidents and what was found within our district analysis for the Rollingwood area. And then here to answer any
All right,
any
thank
questions.
you, Chief. Do we have questions from council? Sarah?
So if, excuse me, if your primary interest is in the lower level medical calls, would that be a fire truck, or would it be a, more like an ambulance-sized vehicle?
It's going to be it's almost like our brush trucks, if you've seen those. So our squad vehicle that we're currently utilizing is still a fire truck. So it has 400 gallons of water. It's able to do grass fires, which is a good addition to have close into the city. So it's able to do grass fires. If we have a small vehicle fire, they can start on those. They won't have enough pump capacity, that kind of stuff for a house fire, but they can protect exposures, to contain it. So it is a firefighting vehicle that does that. And that's what we utilized. If any of the community or the council members were present, we had that staffed here during the ice storm. And so we staffed a crew, I believe that was 9-day event, maybe 7 days a week or a little bit more, to have a presence in Rollingwood so we could get to the area. And so it would be something very similar to that response vehicle that we'd be looking at doing.
So the first time I heard about this was when I attended the meeting virtually last January.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it was the January of the beginning of this year. That's when I think it was winter time sometime during the pandemic. Anyway, I'm trying to, and I just pulled up the budget. I'm trying to remember, what amount of money do you have available to invest in the location right now?
So we still have bonds that are available within the department, and then we have started a committed fund with reserves for fire station design and planning that we funded, and so the community authorized, and it's been about 15 years because our bonds are about to be paid off for the other ones, but we have approximately $2.5 million that we can issue in bonds. And then we have some committed funds available that we can do for fire station design and planning. And we also did budget within this budget's, the new fiscal year, we have put in place for, additional design and planning. We're also looking, because we're not only looking in the Rollingwood area, but we're exploring our options out west as well to add an additional station with staff. So we're doing both of those kind of at the same time. We are planning to move forward with hiring 6 firefighters after the first of the year to staff that squad vehicle full-time. And right now we're searching. We want to continue to move forward with it, but we're searching for the best place to put them on a temporary basis while we continue to resolve where we're going to put them full-time.
So the bond proceeds that you have available, a portion of that can be used for the unit in addition to your 5-year goal of doing the station?
It could be. So we could do.
If we had some sort of partnership.
Yes, yeah, we can use some of the bond funding, and again we have some committed reserves that we're putting away in savings for fire that have placed in for design, a land purchase, or so we're kind of doing it with bonds available and funding. A fire station, if we did a fire station out west, they're going to exceed the $2.5 million for the total purchase, but that's a much bigger, it's a big facility, probably a ladder truck, that kind of stuff that we're looking at out west.
What type of space requirements do you think you'd be looking at? I mean, obviously a bay, a garage for the unit, for the vehicle, and then is there some office space requirements?
There'd probably be, it's going to be 2, our initial thought is being on the squad vehicle, so it's a staff of 2. So they would need, shower facilities, restroom facilities, an office to complete reports, do online trainings that they'll need to do.
Would it be a 24/7 where you'd need to have,
That was my, yeah.
you know,
We would probably want to have
sleeping area and?
have a sleep for two people it would be a 24/7, yes ma'am. That would be our ideal to be able to staff that.
From a strategic standpoint, have you considered whether or not it would be better to have the location on Bee Caves Road or in the interior of the city?
So the Bee Caves Road response, we have evaluated those. A lot of it is property, so if there's a place to put the fire station, that land that's available to be able to do it, to be able to do something like that. The response along Bee Caves Road would, if it was right on Bee Caves, it would assist getting, out further into the ESD district. But having something within the residential community would be a good response. We have really good response on Bee Caves Road from Austin Fire Department, that's Station 32. And then when Station 901 comes in from Westlake and Bee Caves, so they're the ones that usually run like the collisions, and they have really good response time on Bee Caves Road. And so I think if there was an opportunity at this location, that would be ideal.
Are the personnel that you would have staffing in this unit, are they EMS, are they first responders that are EMS certified?
They're first responders, so we respond with, our firefighters are all EMTs, that's basic EMTs. And then each apparatus has advanced EMTs on them as well. And so we can do IVs, pain medicine. Basically, the advanced EMTs can do everything but cardiac drugs and narcotics. Is how we can do
And
this.
so if we were to partner on some sort of facility, there'd be some life-saving equipment that would be probably included in that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There would be. They would have those medical bags the same as we carry on our engine companies, and that's what we carried like during the ice storm. Those were available. Those advanced EMTs were staffing that vehicle during that.
And your time frame is you're trying to accomplish this in the next year?
Well, that's when we started that with 2019. We knew it was an immediate need. Our consultant felt like it was an immediate need, and so
They always do.
They always do. That's right. Really, COVID, just like when we started focusing our response efforts on COVID, we kind of had to wait on some of the strategic planning efforts, and so, but it is something that if we found something within the year, we would be ready to do that.
What if you were just making progress within the year?
That would be great too. So I think discussions, making progress that we can, show our Board of Commissioners, that I can tell the
You
Board
have
of
a plan.
Commissioners that we have a plan that we're trying to initiate and develop.
We used to have a fire truck here.
We did when I first started.
Long
There
time
was
ago.
there was a fire truck and it had rolling wood on the side, and it staffed the bay out there, so we would come over and
Right.
have that as well.
What do you need from council, from Rollingwood, to continue this dialogue? Like what are the next steps for us?
Well, I think really now is to see if there's, a possible interest in doing something. If the council is, looking at doing something with facilities, if there's an interest in a partnership. And I think that's what our Board of Commissioners is interested in, is there a possibility that our two entities can work together? I feel like with both government agencies working together, it's a benefit for not only each entity but the community. As we try and save funds to be able to accomplish really public service goals, and then this would be public safety, EMS, fire.
So you've done this needs assessment. City Council has done a similar spatial needs assessment for our facilities here. have you done a spatial needs assessment for this additional unit, or would that be something? I mean, it sounds like it would be pretty straightforward,
I
but
think it would be pretty straightforward. We do have a spatial needs assessment actually on our agenda Tuesday evening for the fire station out west we're looking at. That would be a standalone facility. So we have that as an agenda item. But we have not for just the individual unit, but we have a pretty good idea with a staff of 2,
what you
what
need.
we're gonna need. With those.
I think depending on whether council would want to move forward, you know, at some point we'd probably need to marry those, kind of our spatial needs assessment with your spatial needs to see if there's some commonality there.
Mm-hmm. And that's something we can definitely share, you know, when we're working on the other one, we can have them, you know, also look at a 2-person and do a spatial needs of what we would need for a squad vehicle. So,
Remind me, is Virgil Flathouse still the chair?
yes, he's
Okay.
still our board president.
Our board president, yeah. Do you know Virgil Flathouse? He lives over, right on the edge of Rollingwood,
Okay.
on Ridgewood. But he's the board president.
He's the board president, and
He'd
then
be a
our,
good person for you to connect with too,
and then our treasurer is
on the
Kurt,
odds.
Kurt Keister, and he's
And-
the Rollingwood appointment. He lives in, I believe on Park Hills.
Yes,
So-
yeah, the Travis County Commissioner Precinct 3 appoints the board for them.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions for Chief?
We have some Boy Scouts here. Do you
Oh.
have any, would there be any benefit to the Boy Scouts in our area of putting the location here, or any other things you wanna comment on?
Well, I think with the scouts and just the community as a whole, I think it's, you know, we like doing interaction. We do, you know, at our fire station, we do, right now they're Cub Scouts. You know, we typically get the Cub Scouts up to tour the fire station, so that I always think that's a benefit. We do birthday parties at our fire station, so it's just a benefit, I think, to the community as a whole. And then if Boy Scouts, we've got several Eagle Scouts on staff, so they're always eager to kind of, you know, have people drop by and talk about different things, and that have kind of come up through the Boy Scouts and really enjoy the Eagle Scouts and that kind of stuff too. So I think that's good, and it's just yeah, we love interacting with, you know, the kids and community on that. So I think having that here, if there was an opportunity for us to, you know, have more of a presence, it would be ideal.
Okay, any other questions for the chief? Thank you again for coming.
Yes.
Well, first we'll ask council if there's any action to be taken tonight. So there's no action, but don't take that as lack of interest. I do think we're probably interested, so let us talk about what that might mean for us. We have some new council members coming on soon.
Okay.
We'll probably want to get them up to speed and then probably double back and have more of a conversation with you.
That sounds great.
Well, and just for clarification, you're just presenting tonight, so I would take some action, but we don't have that on the agenda.
Fair.
But I would personally be interested in seeing the conversation continue, and like you were saying, seeing what it would take to kind of marry the 2 spatial needs assessments.
Right.
And what the timeline would be for you all
Mhm.
to start moving forward as well, so that we can kind of gauge on our side if
Yep.
that would work.
Okay.
So we'll try to get something back on the agenda for action.
Okay.
Figure out what that action would be in the next month or 2.
That sounds great.
There's a lot of overlap between what would be required for a fire station and things that we are saying, you know, the shower facilities,
Right.
the
Restroom facility.
sleeping area for, you know, emergencies when people have to be here, you know,
Yeah. I
break
think there's
area, all that stuff would
totally
be
agree, yeah.
helpful for the police to have access to that as well,
Mm-hmm.
and public works people, you know. It would be a good combination.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So report that back to your,
Will do. I'll report that back next week, and we'll keep, going down that path. And we'll report back to you once, any comments they have next week. And then, as we move forward with our needs assessment, how we can include our spatial needs so we can combine those together if they do the same thing for our station that we're looking at out west.
Great.
All right.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Good to see you all.
All right, moving on to agenda item number 3, presentation and discussion on the quarterly investment report for the fourth quarter. We have Abel.
Currently, the city of Rolling Wood has all its reserves invested with Texaco. And compared to the yield and interest rate from the previous quarter, it's gone up a little bit, not much, nothing to brag about. Excuse me. So it's gone up about from $16 to about $30.
Well, you
Like I s-
doubled it.
Like I said, nothing to brag about. So, and like I said, the yield is very, very small, obviously. So, anyway, basically, that's where we are as far as our investments are concerned.
All right, any questions for Abel regarding our 2 bips?
Well, they're safe anyway.
Yeah, they are safe. Boy, they are safe. Okay. No other questions for Abel. Moving off of agenda item number 3, moving on to agenda item number 4, presentation and discussion on the budget review for the fourth quarter. Abel?
Yes, sir. The numbers I was looking at, they're all pre-audit. They will change after the auditors come in and do their year-end adjustments. Some of the major items, as far as the city's concerned on property taxes, we met our estimated revenue for the year, so we did okay there. On sales taxes, we exceeded our budget, but it still was less than $60,000 from the previous year. So we budgeted conservatively, and we exceeded it, but again, it was less than the previous year's collections. On water sales, more or less the same thing there. We budgeted less than the previous year. We did exceed the budget, but we still were $80,000 more less, than the previous year. As far as the general fund was concerned, overall, our revenue did exceed our budget, and our expenditures, we spent less than what we had budgeted for. So our fund balance should increase a little bit there when all the audit adjustments are done. The water fund, our revenues and expenditures exceeded our budgets, but when you look at the previous year, they more or less were the same in terms of the net gain or loss. So as far as fund balance was concerned with the water fund, it's more or less stayed the same overall. And wastewater fund, the revenue did exceed the budget by more or less about $85,000, but our expenditures more or less stayed where they were the previous year. So wastewater fund, hopefully their fund balance hopefully will increase at the end of the year. That's all I have on some of the big items as far as the budget. The budget's concerned. But again, this is pre-audit. The auditors will always be making year-end adjustments, accruals, deferrals, and so forth. So we'll see what happens. They're scheduled to come in at the end of November, so that's when they'll be doing their annual audit.
Thank
Can
you.
explain why the telecom taxes were so much lower than estimated?
You're ahead of me.
I'm sorry, what was that?
The
Telecom.
telecom taxes?
On sales taxes?
Telecom?
The telecom.
Oh,
why they were
telecom?
so much
Yeah,
lower
I believe there was a change in the law, and some of the AT&T, Grande, and some of the others, I think they're only paying the 1% and not the 5%. That's why you see that decrease in telecom.
Well,
Do-
who's getting the money? Because my bill's not going down.
Yeah, they gave us a letter saying that for House Bill whatever, that they opted to go with the lesser of those percentages. So that's why our telecom has really gone down.
Do you recall, I think we took that into account when we budgeted.
Yes,
This time.
I think Amy here brought it to our attention also about the decrease in telecom taxes. So we did consider that. But I didn't expect it to drop this much, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But it really has dropped.
And then also, on the electric utility franchise fee, I see that's about, it's at 66%. Are you still expecting that to come in at the end of Q4?
Yeah, normally, this probably only has 3/4 in there. The city of Austin's late in paying us. So this is not on accrual basis. The utility taxes are basically cash basis, which means I will probably be getting that fourth quarter sometime this month from the city of Austin.
Okay. All right, any other questions for Abel? Thank you, Abel.
Yes, sir.
All right, we'll move now to public hearing, and we will open the public hearing at 7:29 on agenda item number 5. Public hearing, discussion, and possible action to approve an ordinance to require silt fencing for any residential landscaping work that would result in silt discharge, including but not limited to sod installation and turf installation. Recognize Carrie to tell us about this agenda item.
Good evening, council. There will be 3 public hearings this evening on ordinances. I've been working with the Planning and Zoning Commission on these since May. And this first one that's coming to you is for silt fencing for residential properties that could result in a discharge of silt. The thought behind this was to put in some bumpers to help us honor our SWIP plan, our stormwater protection permit, but alleviate the burden of having another permit process that would be perhaps onerous on the community. And I'll be glad to answer any questions.
So is the crux of this to give you some teeth to enforce some mitigation efforts if you need to?
Yeah, so the way things are right now, if somebody's working on a residential landscaping project, they are not required by ordinance to have silt fencing or some sort of mitigation like a mulch sock. What I can do is approach them and say, hey, you're not required to put in any silt fencing, which can be costly. But if you discharge and someone documents it and we catch you, then we can issue a citation. This gives me the ability to, if somebody has a project, and I'm not talking about a minor flower bed against somebody's house, but if somebody's scraping up their yard and putting in new grass, and it's going to be an ongoing scenario, I can require them to have silt fencing until that sod is put in place.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Carrie? All right, do we have anyone here wishing to speak on agenda item number 5, public comment?
We have nobody sign up.
All right, then we will exit public hearing at 7:32 and come back into regular session. Council, I'm happy to entertain a motion if someone has one, then we can continue that discussion.
I would move to approve ordinance number 2021-10-20-05.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there a discussion to approve ordinance number 2021-10-20-05?
I have a couple
Carrie, you want to step back up?
comments and or revisions that I think we need. From the beginning of the, all the whereases on there. It says the city sits over the Edwards Aquifer recharge zone and receives water from the Edwards Aquifer.
Doesn't,
That is not correct. We don't get water from the aquifer. So we sit over the recharge zone, but I think we just need to scratch the rest of that statement.
okay.
And then on the next page, or no, at the bottom, in section 2. The top of the next page. It seems really wordy, the first sentence, and it seems to me, instead of adding the sentence that, or
Where are you, Council?
the very top of page 2,
Where the holder of a
where it
building
says the
permit?
holder of a building permit or the owner of a property for projects where a permit is not required.
Mhm.
If we just say, the owner of a property shall enclose with the silt fence, that just seems more clear.
I think the reason that it's written that way is because we have other requirements called out in the, for contractors in the building permit requirements. But
And then is it the, the holder of the building permit who receives the citation if they violate the silt fencing as
We-
required by their building permit?
we have two
don't
different types of
Have a
citations.
building permit, that's the whole point of this, right? Is that this is for projects where you don't have a building permit.
That's what the amendment is.
Right, so we have two different ways to cite this. One of the citations goes to the builder, and I can't remember if it's constituted as a nuisance. I'd have to go back and look at that. And one of them goes to the property owner. It's the property owner citation, which is a violation of the MS4 permit. That's the $2,000 fine. There is a $500 fine as well. It's a different section of the code.
It seemed awkward. And then down in section 4, it says, this ordinance shall be cumulative of all other ordinances of the city of Bee Cave. And we should probably change that to Rollingwood.
Yeah, probably appropriate not to reference BK.
So just for clarification, Sarah, I agree that striking receives water from the Edwards Aquifer and replacing the city of Bee Cave with the city of Bournemouth would be amendments. I think the language that's been proposed should remain unless we give Carrie time to go back and consider any consequences of changing it, since it's something that's been worked on.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I thought it was simpler to do that, but if there's a reason for having it that way, I'm fine with that.
Okay, we have a motion, and we have an amendment to the motion to strike the words "and receives water from the Edwards Aquifer," and we have an amendment to, in section 4, to substitute the word Rollingwood for the words Bee Cave. Are those acceptable to the
Yes.
author? All right, consider them adopted. You now have an amended motion before you and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No. Ayes have it. Motion passes. All right, we will move on to agenda item number 6. And let the record reflect Buck Shapiro has joined the dais. All right, well, moving on to agenda item number 6, we will open a public hearing on item number 6. Public hearing, discussion, and possible action to approve an ordinance to add a definition for retaining walls to specify any fence or wall built or designed to retain or restrain lateral forces of soil or other materials, said materials being similar in height to the weight of the wall, and opening public hearing at 7:37. Carrie.
Good evening. This ordinance is just to add a definition for retaining walls so that the reviewers and I have something to work on off of we have had some scenarios where people brought us retaining walls that didn't retain. So this adds a clear definition of how, for a ratio, essentially, a metric for how much soil needs to be retained. It was taken from the planner's dictionary, and I will be glad to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Carrie. Any questions for Carrie, first of all?
What's an example of a material other than soil that is retained?
It could be stone.
Stone, okay. And then, but you're saying that there have been examples where people are putting up a wall that's labeled a retaining wall, but doesn't actually retain anything. Got it. I think I've seen that. Okay.
Well, or it retains this much dirt and then it's this much higher above that, so it's.
I gotcha. Okay.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you, Carrie. Any members of the public wishing to speak on, for, or against agenda item number 6? Ashley? Anyone else? All right, hearing none, we will close the public hearing at 7:39. And go back into regular session. Do I have a motion on ordinance 2021-10-20-06, agenda item number 6?
I'll move to approve ordinance number 2021-10-20-06.
You have a motion.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
My only concern with the definition of retaining wall on here is that it's very, very non-specific. I mean, the wording that's being added from an enforcement standpoint, similar in height, in whose opinion? You know, is that 3 inches, is it 3 feet, is it, how much difference can you have? And I think that's the issue that we have right now, is that there's no guidance on what the allowable differential is, and this is kind of vague.
So I feel that the issue we have right now is that we have no definition, and I like that there's a little bit of flexibility in this, so that if someone had a retaining wall that was 2 inches over soil, that it gives the reviewers a little bit of common sense discretion. I think we tend to go more restrictive, and then if someone disagrees with being more restrictive, then they're welcome to appeal that to you all.
So you said this definition came from what?
The planner's dictionary,
So it's a definition that's known in the art.
yes.
Okay. Did you have an alternative definition that's known in the art, Sarah, to propose?
No, it just, from spending almost 40 years enforcing permits and reading language and making sure they're enforceable in practice, this seems very vague and not well defined when it's a discretionary thing. So it just up for argument on what's allowed.
But less argument than currently.
Well, I mean, it's better than nothing as what we have right now, so we should probably approve this, and then if you want to come back with an
Incremental.
agenda item in the future or something of that nature that gives.
How
them
often
more-
do you run into, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah.
How often do you run into this?
I've run into it a handful of times, but there's only 530 some homes, so.
Fair enough. All right.
I will say that we did have about 4 or 5 public hearings with Planning and Zoning
To come to this.
Commission to come to this.
Okay. All right, any other questions for Carrie? Any other discussion? All right, you have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approval of ordinance number 2021-10-20-06. Say aye. Amy Patillo,
Aye.
Buck Shapiro,
Aye.
Sarah Hudson,
Aye.
Gavin Massengill, aye. Being 4 ayes, no nays, motion carries. All right, with that, we'll move on to agenda item number 7, and open a public hearing at 7:43. A public hearing, discussion, and possible action to approve an ordinance for driveways that limits residential lots to not more than 3 total curb cuts and not more than 2 on a single street frontage, and limits the total combined width of aprons to not exceed a total of 45 feet. And recognize Carrie to explain the item.
So,
Oh, and we're opening that at, let's say, 7:43.
so this item's coming to you. This was directed to the Planning and Zoning Commission last spring, and the reviewers and I were having some disagreements in how to interpret the code. We have really specific code regarding circular driveways, and we have specific code as to how far a driveway can be off a property line. To me, it seemed that the spirit of the code was to limit that capacity, but there isn't actually any limits put on the number of driveways that a single property can have. So, Planning and Zoning Commission had an appetite to limit that total number of curb cuts in an effort to keep the fronts of properties open and not have kind of a parking lot scenario. So we came to a point of allowing 3 total curb cuts where you could have a scenario of a circular driveway or 2 driveways on one frontage and a third on a side. Or if you're an interior lot, having 2 curb cuts, either a circular driveway or 2 separate driveways, but not more than 3 total, and then a maximum width of 45 feet. And the way we came up with 45 feet is that you need roughly 12 feet to have a vehicle on a driveway with the doors open. And so we added that for 3 and then allowed a little more space for wider vehicles. So 45 seemed like a fairly reasonable total width.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Carrie?
I'm guessing this is, maybe it's just an obvious thing, but I looked up apron just to make sure I knew what the definition was, and we don't have a definition of apron in our code. So what's your working definition? It's the...
So it would be the approach, I think it's 4 feet from the street, from the front of the curb, and it has to have a certain slope and curve outward.
So do we have is that something that's defined in our code?
There's building code for it. I
Okay.
don't believe, let me see if we have we put parameters on how an apron must be constructed.
Okay.
I'm not sure that's listed expressly as a definition.
Yeah, I couldn't find a definition, but that doesn't mean that it's not defined in a way that everyone understands what that means. I haven't had a reason to understand what that would mean, and so thought I'd make sure we knew what we were, like I understood what we're
So
doing.
we do say in 28-6A of the Code of Ordinances that each driveway apron shall begin at the street gutter and extend at least 4 feet away from the street. And the crown of each driveway apron shall be at least as high as the nearest street curb. Nearest the apron, curbing on the driveway apron shall not extend in a curve having a radius of less than 5 feet beginning at the street curbing.
All right, so that would be what we're saying, can't exceed a combined width of 45 feet.
Correct.
Okay.
Carrie, about how much time did planning and zoning spend on this one?
About 5 meetings.
Okay, just checking. All right, any other questions for Carrie?
Is this an issue?
I would say that the only issue is that the code is really specific about circular driveways and it's really specific about aprons.
All right, so it's just a
The
clean it up.
specificity
All right. No, I was just
led
curious.
to the question, I
All
think.
right. That's fine. You're good.
You can't have two circle driveways now.
Yeah.
You can only have a circle driveway and then if you're in a corner and then a driveway to the side.
I
Or
get
a
it.
circle and a, yeah. All right.
Need a flow chart for that.
Or you can
Alright.
seek a variance for that extreme hardship of
Yeah.
not being allowed a fourth driveway.
I mean,
All right, any other questions for Carrie?
that's a great looking.
All right, thank you,
property
Carrie.
right there with
Any-
4 curved cuts.
Any members of the public wishing to speak on, for, or against, item number 7? Ashley?
No, sir.
All right, hearing none, we will close the public hearing at 7:49 and move back into regular session. Do I have a motion on item number 7, ordinance number 2021-10-2007?
I'll move to approve ordinance number 2021-10-20-07.
You have a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
So I don't know if I should ask this in the hearing or now, but I have noticed when I have been walking around in the neighborhood that there are a number of homes that have curb cuts that are not associated with a driveway. And I'm not quite sure how this meshes with the way this is worded, because clearly that doesn't have an apron, because it's just a curb cut on the, for the curb and then the yard. And I think they're there for drainage purposes. But when we say there is a limit on no more than 3 total curb cuts, that to me is a curb cut.
Sure.
And I don't think that was the intention to limit those, but I don't know
No.
if we need to make some kind of a
That's a really good point. And
qualifier for that.
where this is placed in the code, where we looked at adding this is in the driveway section. So I would not, I would think that we might have a little bit of discretion there, but if we need to add cuts for residential
I don't
drive,
think
we
it
need
would
to
be an
add.
issue, because when you're submitting a building permit, you're showing your driveway access, your curb cuts, and then if you had a curb cut that was for drainage, it would be treated separately.
Number 5, if we said, right now it says each residential lot shall maintain not more than 3 total curb cuts with no more than 2 curb cuts on a single street frontage. If we were to add the words total curb cuts for driveways,
Or total curb cuts for, intended for vehicular traffic.
Or ingress, egress, maybe, or?
Yep.
just right there, if we add something to just be clarifying, does that solve the issue?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Charlie, do you have any suggested language for us off the cost cap?
What you said sounded good to me.
Which one?
Didn't you say 4 driveways?
For driveways.
Yeah.
Pretty technical.
Very
All right,
technical.
so I would propose amending my motion to include adding 4 driveways after this first phrase in section 5. So it would read, each residential lot shall maintain not more than 3 total curb cuts for driveways.
You have an amended motion.
So I just FYI, I looked it up. The name of the section is driveways with more than 1 curb cut. And then it goes on to talk about driveways and continuous driveways. It's very clear we're talking about driveways in this section that we're amending. I don't think we need to add that language. I think we're fine. The
There you
entire
are. There you are,
section,
reading the code again.
the entire section deals with driveways.
I'm willing to add it or not add it. I've put it out there and
It
Sarah?
can't hurt to add it, but I don't think it's necessary.
Let's add it.
I just wanted to make sure that
Belt
it
and
didn't
suspenders, let's add it.
Okay.
penalize somebody that already had a curb cut for drainage and then it.
All right,
they
it's
weren't able to
added.
put in there.
great.
Second? Motion and a second, the amended motion for item number 7. All those in, or further discussion? Going once, going twice. All those in favor, say aye, opposed say no. Amy Patillo,
Aye.
Buck Shapiro,
Aye.
Sarah Hudson,
Aye.
Gavin Massey, aye. Being 4 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you all
your
very
work on
much.
that. As always, good job. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion? Sarah, help me out.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second? The class is not paying attention.
Sorry.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
A second.
Buck seconds. All those in favor say aye, opposed say no. Sarah?
Aye.
Buck?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Gavin, aye. 4 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Moving on to the regular agenda, calling up agenda item number 11, discussion and possible action on improvements to the water lines around and near Vale Street. I will turn it over. I asked for this one, we'll pull up 12 in a minute that is gonna be somewhat related. I asked for this one to be added. I think all of us are on the same. You might have had several requests to have this one added actually, but I'll turn it over to Amber to give us a quick recap and then maybe recognize Kay Freeze to have a discussion. I also brought a visual aid. All right, Amber.
Sure, thanks, Gavin. So basically, I think everybody knows, we have been issuing a lot of boil water notices lately, specifically for the Vale Vance area. And we know that that water line, even without doing our capital improvements plan, which is underway, authorized by council, we know that that water line is a problem. Crossroads was supposed to be here tonight. They are the city's official water operator, and they do emergency repair work for us. What they have come to find about that line is that the leaks have been on PVC lines. It's a thin-walled PVC, as you can see. These lines were not bedded properly. So it consists of mixed in various sizes of native rock. And so you can even see on this example that Gavin has, you can see where it's indented where it was rubbing on the rock. And then as the water pressure goes through the thin lined pipe, it vibrates and it vibrates on that rock. And then eventually it causes fissures and splits the pipe. And so even as we make the repairs, once the pipe is broken, it's always compromised, and so it's just on this cycle of just continually being repaired and linking and so forth. And so the Vale line is a 4-inch, then it turns into 6-inch, and then it turns into 4-inch and curves all the way around to Timberline. And then the line off of Bettis. That was the most recent one. It also is a problem and would need repaired. And basically, if there's a line break on any of those, that section of line, we're taking out several homes who have to be on a boil water notice. It's very inconvenient and not very fun to be in the middle of boil water notice almost every week of your life. So that's what we're facing. Dale and Greg, I've got from K-Freeze. Do y'all want to add anything to?
Thanks, guys. Please identify yourself.
Will do. Dale Murphy with K-Freeze. This is Greg Blackburn. Greg Blackburn with K-Freeze. Thanks for having us, Council. You guys got it figured out pretty well, I think.
We've answered
a lot of experience, apparently. But yeah, you know, the shallow depths, poor bedding, and the PVC pipe in general is fine if it's the right kind of PVC pipe for a water main. And unfortunately, that's just not the right kind. Especially we don't have good bedding and a nice depth to it. So it's very unsurprising that this problem is happening.
Is the gauge, what gauge does it need to be?
Well, they come in classifications and stuff. So like normally water pipe for this would be what we call C900 pipe, and that would be rated for like 200 PSI of pressure, and it's much thicker than that. And it's just made for more of a utility work and not like, that's more for like irrigation and private land type of pipe is what I would call that, at least in today's terms. You know, when the time it was installed, maybe it was a little,
Cutting edge?
yeah.
Not so much?
Yeah. So I think as far as thinking about doing a project quickly to try to address these issues and stuff, I think the main question for us would be the extents we want to go with that. And part of the other problem that we're facing, that Amber and the Crossroads folks are facing all the time, is when they have a break, the valves, in particular in this part of the town, don't shut the mains off very well, so they have to shut off a big chunk of the city to even repair the pipe. And so replacing pipe and having valves that actually work, and we know where they're all at, hopefully, and can find them and actually get them to turn off would be go a long way to not making these as big of a deal when they do happen. But anyway, so heading back to how much we actually decide to do, the area that's been breaking a lot there at Vale, I don't know how long that little piece, 1,800 linear feet there, just to kind of do that piece, and then adding Bettis is another.
Oh, sorry, that included Bettis.
Oh, that includes Bettis?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's another like 1,250 feet to go all the way down to the timberline.
So I've got one kind of overarching question. Obviously, this pipe has been in the ground for a long time. It hasn't been bedded well, ever. It's always been shallow, but we seem to have had more waterline breaks recently than we've ever had. So, like, what's different? What has triggered this?
The age of the pipe starts to come into play. It starts to become more brittle, and it just becomes that. I think that's largely probably what's happening. And then just as Amber described, as the vibration of things, after the longer it's sitting there doing that and rubbing up against a sharp rock, eventually it's going to wear its way through.
And is it a sort of a death spiral too? Like once you depressurize it, fix it, repressure, like that. Is that adding to the?
I'm not sure that's helping. I'm not sure that's a main thing, but it definitely does seem, my experience has been, once you start seeing that, it starts to accelerate, and you see this more and more. It's that definitely, I don't know if it's more just happened, all the pipe got laid at the same time, and it's all kind of experiencing the same problem around the same time, or if it has to do with.
Have we done anything along that area or along that line where, like, are we running it at a higher pressure than we were, say, 2 years ago?
So I'm not sure about from 2 years ago to now and stuff. One of the things that we've asked Crossroads to investigate is that part of town. If you look at the map that was in your packet, it shows like a red shaded area in that area. And that red shaded area should have lower pressure than the pipes in the non-red shaded area. And so we've asked Crossroads to double check that the pressure reducing valves that lower the pressure that gets delivered over there is actually operating and lowering the pressure.
Okay, good.
And I haven't heard back yet officially if they are properly set or if it has experienced higher pressure, but that is definitely something we're asking them to check out.
It is not yet operating at a lower pressure.
It's been confirmed that it's not.
Yes, they are working on it still, but it is not yet.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, so I don't know the timing of when that changed or if it changed or if it was always that way.
Okay, that's good to know. So we've potentially identified at least one problem.
That's right.
And so what do we do to make sure? Well, first of all, explain those valves. Like what happens there?
Yeah, so the higher pressure is basically set by wherever there's a storage tank somewhere. The elevation of the water in that tank to the faucet at your house, that elevation difference sets what the pressure basically is. And so when you're in a hilly city like we have here, the lower parts of the city have much higher pressure than the higher parts of the city. And so when you get to, it's usually kind of like a break point of an elevation. Like if you look at where that red line, the edge of that red there is probably following along more or less of a contour line of an elevation. And everything that's downhill of there starts to see pressures that are probably in excess of 95 PSI unless you did something to lower the pressure. And so a pressure reducing valve basically just induces it pitches down the pipe so far that it causes a pressure loss across that valve, and so then the pressure's below, and it senses what the pressures below are on the downstream side. So if they start to raise up, then it shuts it off entirely. And so it's in there trying to like induce what we call a head loss or friction to make the pressure lower on the downstream side.
Okay.
And stuff. So yeah.
Okay, so to Amber, so you have heard back from Crossroads. They don't believe that the pressure reducing valves are operating correctly?
Correct. They don't believe that, they believe that the high pressure is bleeding, not that it's not necessarily operating correctly, but maybe that they're bleeding, the higher
Yeah,
pressure is
so-
bleeding into the lower pressure plane.
Like generally the way that works is like you have a pipe that's running through, they have a closed valve, and then you have a T with a pressure reducing valve that comes back and ties in. If somebody's opened up the valve
Oh,
in there and just lets water go through and bypass that valve. So it could be the pressure reducing valves, could be that a valve somewhere is open that shouldn't be open, that's letting the
It's
high
not
pressure.
letting it go through
Yeah.
the pressure reducing valve. I got
It could
you.
be both of those things, you know, one or either or both.
And do we know how many pressure reducing valves we have in that, along that 1800?
None that would be specifically on there that we'd be replacing. I mean, they're right at the borders of these areas and things, but we could look at replacing them if they needed to be replaced when
Yeah.
they finish looking at it.
I think some of the other valves they were talking about, though, are not the pressure reducing valves, they're just the
Just the
shut-off
valve.
valves.
The shut-off valve, the gate valves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But do we know exactly how many pressure reducing valves we have?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I think we just have,
There's just one inside the system, outside of the.
Isn't there two?
point.
I think there's two in the system and one at the City of Boston delivery point.
Yeah, on Riley.
Exactly.
Is it potential that we would need another pressure reducing valve or not?
We may need to replace them or replace the internals, as they would call it, but I don't think it's needed to add another. The reason to add another would be to increase the flow available, like if a fire happened, you need to have enough pressure reducing valves that let enough water through to do that. But I don't think that's our scenario. It would be more of a replacement or fixing of the existing valves, or checking to make sure the right valves are closed.
And Dale, you and I talked the other day, and I asked if we solved for the pressure issue, is it your opinion that we would be fine with the lines on Vale, Advance, and Bettis? And you said that's one of the issues, but it's not gonna take care, the other issues are truly that not very deep enough, not on proper bedding, and a thin wall PVC pipe.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard to give a definitive answer on that, of course, but my guess would be this problem, it may reduce, we may have fewer of them, but I'm guessing that we'll still continue to have breaks on that line.
I thought we had replaced some of that line on Vale.
Especially right now, it's full of repair clamps and those kinds of things that also are prone to not being the best. So they put pressures on the pipes and.
And the line on Vale is also in the yards of people's homes, so it'd be nice to move them to the street. We wouldn't disturb landscaping or
Every time you have to dig it up and stuff.
flood somebody's home when we are making a repair.
I think we've also had a lot more vibration, not just from the water, but from the construction. There's a lot more big trucks driving around, there's a lot more jackhammering with the construction. I mean, my whole house vibrates with the construction across the street from me. So there's just a lot of contributing factors causing to that wear, not just the water itself going through the line.
It's the fun being on limestone, all on big rock like we are here.
This is
Okay,
slightly
I'm-
off topic, but do we know where this map came from? Who put this together?
In the packet?
The pipes sizes on here?
Oh, we put that together.
Yeah, we kind of grabbed that from the previous engineer and have been trying to keep it updated and going back and forth with Crossroads on getting things updated.
'Cause I have questions about some of the
Well, and
sizes that are
I've-
shown, I don't think they're accurate.
But
The guy operating the backhoe who gave me this would agree with you that it's not accurate. I had that discussion in the field.
Yeah, I mean, because there's some stuff on here that just doesn't make sense. You just wouldn't put an 8-inch line at the end of a 6-inch line,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it doesn't make sense.
All right, I have a motion for us. It's a short-term issue, but I move to authorize the mayor to work with Crossroads and instruct them to analyze, repair, or replace any pressure-reducing valves in or around the area of Bell Street to ensure proper functionality.
I'll second for discussion.
We have a motion and a second.
I don't think the pressure reducing valves are around Vale though, right?
They're not exactly right there, no, but
Yeah.
the ones that
They're
affects that
they're
area.
They're at the influent to the
they're at the
pressure
edge of the-
zone,
Yeah.
but not, Vale is at the far end of the pressure zone, so they're,
Okay. I'll amend the
farther south.
motion to wherever the pressure-reducing
Yeah.
valves may be.
yeah.
And I think they're already doing this, right, Amber?
They are working on that as well.
Well, they are, but I don't want to wait 30 days to come back and say, oh, it's going to cost $5,000 to fix it. I want him to have the authority to, I mean, if it's a huge cost,
Fair.
come back to us, but I want to give him the authority to get rolling on at least a short-term, not that it's a solution, but if they're not working, I don't want to wait 30 days to have to come back to tell us, oh, yeah, well, we should do that.
Fair, and, another motion, that maybe I would request is to authorize, K-Freeze to work on a work authorization to
That's
bring
next.
back, okay, you read my mind.
I did. Any further discussion
Well,
on?
I just want to clarify, because I feel like we're all going to get a lot of questions about what this means, right? Because, I mean, this summer I was willing to take out $3 million, or if we could get it, just to have money to start doing whatever we have to do to fix this. So, we're taking this step, but next month, we should have the results of the CIP, the capital improvement project, right? And that's gonna give us an assessment of our entire water system,
Correct.
and is it gonna give us a cost estimate?
Yeah, it would probably give you like a kind of like a priority list and a cost associated with each project.
Like a
You know.
cut sheet that would, like.
Yeah,
we
it's like, here's a project,
received in
this is the most important
IIP.
one, and then, what
Right.
just real quick, what I envision on that, by the way, is addressing these areas that break a lot would be highest priority, of course, and then second priority would be adding valves, replacing valves, so we actually can shut things off appropriately. Those would be the highest priority things, for sure. I don't think we're gonna have a ton of fire flow issues or anything like that to address. It's gonna be more maintenance of these problems is what I expect to be on that list.
So I agree with this being a good action to take, to at least try to find a solution to one of the possible problems. I just wanna make sure that we can explain that to the people who are wondering, like, how much longer is it gonna be until they actually have a pipe replaced?
Yeah, and in my mind, I think that's where I'd like us to go with the next motion.
Okay,
But my thought is to try to at least take some action that, and again, I don't necessarily think the pressure issue is the be-all, end-all, but I do think when you look at this pipe and you see this lateral break, I mean, you can tell where the rock was sitting here, but the break goes 2 feet, in both directions, and that says to me that it might be running a little bit hot. Wrong or right? I mean, hard to tell, I know, but.
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty common way for that
Can't
kind of
prove
pipe.
I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, I definitely can't. And I can definitely say that higher pressure would add to that problem, for sure.
Right,
The pipe's just brittle.
yeah. Yeah, I do think it's brittle, which is another reason not to run it at
Yeah.
200 PSI.
Well, it shouldn't be that high. It's probably more like 120 or something is my guess, but yeah.
Yeah, and our capable counsel over here pointed out, this is rated for 160 PSI, but I mean, clearly it's not.
Right. Yeah, it's rated for 160 PSI when properly vetted. That's for sure.
Yeah.
That's definitely what that's, if you read their literature, that's what that would mean.
Yeah, so we can't sue them.
We could.
Okay, you have a motion and a second, and then we'll move on to other action on here. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed, say no. Amy?
aye.
Buck?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Gavin, aye. Being 4 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Now, Amber, tell us what else you would like us to possibly consider.
Yes, I would like you to ask K-Freeze to bring back a work authorization task order to work on the design and, construction documents for the construction of the Vale line, Vance, Vale, continuing to Timberline, and then the Bettis line.
Is that getting more to your point, Amy?
Thank you, yes.
You can make that motion if you want.
I'm writing down the,
And just to let you know, we did kind of look up what we thought the rough construction cost on something like that would be.
Yeah, it's about somewhere in the range of like $800,000 to $1 million to do all of that. And just know like the current market is very volatile. We've seen some bids that go all over the place, so that what we would hope is a conservative estimate at this point.
so the roads were Vance, Vale, Timberline, Bettis.
And can you?
Well, down to Timberline, I don't think it
Yes,
included.
down
Oh.
to
Yeah.
each.
And in that work order, well, we'll hear the motion in a minute, but can you give us some phasing?
Yeah.
Of, you know, if we could prioritize where it clearly seems like the biggest problem is and kind of work our way out to the edges.
For sure.
And
Okay.
maybe does it make sense to direct Capries to work with the city administrator on identifying the different funding sources available and providing a recommendation to the council?
Sure. If you've been hiding free money, you need to fess up.
I never hide free money.
Does that actually go to Timberline, or does it go to Rollingwood Drive?
It would be, it wraps around
Because
to,
in order to get to Timberline, you have to go up Rollingwood Drive.
Oh yeah, there's a small portion that's on the road.
It's a little J.
Yeah.
So it does need to go all the way to Timberline?
yeah, cause I think there was some breaks right there at that
Mhm.
intersection, correct?
So does
Yes.
does it go to Timberline, or does it go all the way to the intersection of Riley and Timberline? I'm just trying to figure out where the break point is on here.
Yeah, it goes down Vale on a short piece on Rollingwood to Timberline Drive.
Okay.
Not quite to Riley.
No, it goes past Riley to Timberline. Right, that's what you're saying?
Would it be correct to say Vale down Rollingwood to Timberline? Great,
It's gonna be an awesome motion.
so I have a motion.
I'm ready.
Okay. I would move to authorize Kate Freese to bring a work order to design a replacement water line for Vale down Rollingwood to Timberline, Vance, and Bettis, and to work with the city administrator on identifying the different funding sources available and providing a recommendation to the council.
You have a motion.
I second.
You have a motion and a second. Further discussion?
And we're gonna have a plan in a month for the whole water system?
That'd be the idea. I think this would be very high on that list, if not the top of that list anyway, so I don't know if it,
So we're,
If
so
it's
are
a
you,
whole
Put pipe in.
are you
Yeah.
not?
Sounds like they're already working on it.
Well, that's what I'm saying, I don't know what we're doing if they're already working on it, we're already gonna get it in a month anyway, what
well,
are
this would
we-
be for actually starting the design of this actual replacement and start getting this moving faster.
Okay,
Yeah, rather than waiting for the completion of the CIP, we already know this is gonna be
Yeah.
at the top of the list. Council's giving,
We're just giving formal approval.
Yeah, what we're working on right now is modeling the system and doing some high level cost estimates for that. This would be actually the actual construction plans.
Yeah, primarily what we're working with really is on crossroads and figuring out where valves don't work and getting with Amber and everybody, understanding where all the breaks have been to help identify the worst places within the system so we can prioritize replacements.
Sarah, are you concerned that we need to add more streets?
no, I'm just trying to get a clear idea of, you know, one end to the other end, where it is on here, and what the difference is between what we're authorizing now and what's already being worked on that we're getting in November.
Well, who knows until we start ripping it up, honestly. I mean, it could vary from this map.
So that's a good question that I have too, is, I know you haven't gotten into the design yet, but would you envision trying to move this into existing right of, well, it's in the right of way now, but it's on, it's in the yard, they're
Yeah.
in the yards.
Mhm.
Would you envision trying to do this in the street and then hook it up on both ends and then just abandon?
Yeah, I mean, let alone the just difficulty working, what's more or less seen as people's yards. It also would require us to put a lot of people out of water while we built it, if we built it in the same place or right next to it even, so I think no matter what, it's kind of leading us towards probably
Just-
being in the street. Problem with being in the street is there's more cost there because now you're repaving and that kind of stuff, but you're not replacing driveways and other things. There's kind of a trade-off there, but
We've got some expensive landscaping.
yeah,
I know,
and
I
expensive
think- I
landscaping
think
or
driveways is gonna be less expensive than going through all those people's yards.
retaining walls or whatever else happens to be nearby along some of that route, so.
We replaced that line before we did the repaving down there.
So one of the things they said on Bettis was basically the replacing the road flattened the, it actually flattened the pipe. So it was so heavy and so much. And so whatever, the road actually kind of compromised the water line.
I thought we had replaced the line on Vale. It seems like that was one of the things that we were, when we did the repaving project, that we talked about making sure that we were doing the water line replacements before we repaved the streets, so we didn't repave the streets and then come back in 6 months later and tear them up to put in new.
That was on
Like-
Vale.
That's what,
The lines in the, it's, behind the curb on the property. I don't know if it was,
Sarah, I also thought that we had already put a new water line in the street on Vale,
right,
right? Didn't we do that in the last bond project, or no?
that's what
I thought so
this
too.
is what's in my head.
Yeah, I thought so too.
And which doesn't mean it's true, but I remember specifically talking about doing that before we repaved the street. And we have unabandoned lines that have been replaced. And so,
Well, maybe it did, but it didn't get done right. I mean, so it's kind of a moot point, end of the day.
well, no,
I
but
mean,
if,
I wasn't part of that council that approved all that, so I don't really know all the backdrop, but even if it was supposed to have been done, if it wasn't done right, I mean, that's a whole separate issue from this, in my mind.
What,
I mean-
I'm just really curious, what extents are we talking about on Vale, like the whole length of Vale?
yeah. And my issue is that if there was a parallel line put in,
Is it there?
and it's there already, and we just didn't abandon this line, and so it's still leaking, and that's what's causing the problems, and that's why you can't shut it off. Because there's another line in there that's where the water's supposed to be, but it's still going through that line also.
I think we have the as-built from the 2014 water system improvements, and so
Would that have been on that?
it would
Those
have
set
been
of
on
plans,
that.
or would have
And
been on
I
the-
know, Crossroads has been through those.
We'll double check. I mean, obviously, we're not gonna replace a line that was just built. That wouldn't make sense.
Wasn't that inspected by engineers when it was done? When the construction?
Not these, but yes. I mean, it should have been, I don't know.
Yeah.
I wasn't around either,
See if
for the
we can
record.
find
I mean, and that's.
No, I get what she's
plans and
saying.
stuff.
Yeah, I do too,
But-
yeah, and we need to look at that.
We need to look into that, for sure.
That's the
But
other
I don't think
thing.
that could just like stop us dead in the tracks on what we're doing for tonight.
Yeah, and we definitely
I
wouldn't.
think that's something we gotta figure out before we authorize any major project.
So you'll look at that.
Or,
If we're authorizing design drawings for something that's already there, then,
But it sounds like
I mean,
we're
I hope you
instructing
trust
you.
that I wouldn't do that.
well, but you
Yeah.
may not know that it's there, that's
But
my
I think we're
whole
gonna
point. is
Try to
we
make
need
sure
figure
and
out
that we
if-
know all that, yeah.
well, let's just tell them to look into that before they start the design drawings.
And if you can't find the as-bills,
Yeah, yeah.
let's
And so I
circle
think,
up.
I mean, if I'm correct, the way this would work would be we would go back, come up with our scope and fee for this amendment, for this task order, and you guys would come back to y'all to approve it. Like,
Right.
your motion tonight isn't so much to tell us to start designing it, it's to tell us to start making a fee up that you'll approve next month.
Gavin, weren't you, I mean, your motion was to allow the mayor to kind of move.
Well, that was
forward
just on the
with
That's on the
valves,
valves.
that was just on the valves,
Alright.
yeah.
So can I amend can I add an amendment to my motion?
Yes.
Potentially, so, I would authorize K-Freeze to first evaluate whether there is an existing line in the street. And,
It needs to be part of that, whatever that bond package was, the existing line from the bond package in 2014.
2014, yeah, so to evaluate, how about to evaluate the location of the line placed on Vale as part of in 2014? Would that work?
It works for me.
That
Okay.
works. Can you restate the entire motion?
Okay, so I would authorize K-Freeze to evaluate the location of the line placed on Vale in 2014, and in view of the placement of that line, to bring a work order to either, reconnect that line or to design a replacement water line for Vale down Rollingwood to Timberline, Vance and Bettis, and work with the city administrator on identifying the different funding sources available and provide a recommendation to the council.
Thank you. You have an amended motion. Is there a second?
I second.
You have a motion and a second. Sarah's still contemplating. You good?
No, well, I was just thinking whether or not there was a project before 2014 also, so, I mean, we did a series of water line improvement projects, but.
So, do you want me to just make it generic to evaluate the location, whether there are any lines placed on Vale in the street? Okay, so I'll restate it just again.
I just wanna make sure we're
Yeah, no, that's fair.
checking
Any
it all.
lines placed in
We know you would, but now you're instructed to.
under these streets. Okay. Would it be proper to say, if you did find that there was a line placed into the street, would you be designing, what would you be doing to, would you be,
I think we would, I mean, I wouldn't recommend that we replace a line that was built in 2014 unless it specifically has had a problem, which I'm guessing has not been the case.
right, but we would be removing, we would be,
Decommissioning.
decommissioning.
A parallel line, if there happens to be a parallel,
Do you have-
yeah.
Do you have to design that, or is that just something?
It would be part of the construction, because it would require construction.
You just have to figure out
Okay.
where you have to.
Yeah.
Okay, okay,
Cut
so
it off.
design a decommission, sorry. Okay, I think I have it now.
I think you got it.
Let me second something else again. I'll second something.
This is good, though. It'll be very clear. If I lived on those streets right now, and I'm gonna go to a birthday party on one of those streets right after this, people might ask me
That's
what
why
I'm
you're spending all
talking
the time
about.
on this motion.
Now you are?
Yeah.
You think we're getting out of here that early?
If it's before,
Not at this rate.
well, anyway, as long as it's before midnight. All right, I would move to authorize K-Freeze to evaluate the location of any water lines placed under the street on Vale and connecting roads. Bring a work order to design a decommissioned or replacement water line for Vale down Rollingwood to Timberline, Vance and Bettis, and work with the city administrator on identifying the different funding sources available and providing a recommendation to the council.
You have a perfected amended motion. Is there a second?
I did a few things while I was saying it.
I noticed that.
I will second. You have a motion and a second before you. Is there further discussion?
I second.
I already seconded it.
I third it.
You're out. All right, you have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Amy?
Aye.
Buck?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Gavin? Aye. Being 4 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you. Good work. We'll see what that, at least we took some immediate action, and then you can report back to the party later.
Forward steps.
There's more to come. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 12, discussion and possible action to request a recommendation from the Utility Commission regarding water system upgrades. I'll recognize Amy as it's her agenda item.
Great.
And I don't know if it's still, have we taken action?
Well, why don't I tell you why I put it in here?
Okay.
And then we'll see what y'all think. So, I did note, I submitted this one sheet and I added late, so everyone will know it came in today. The reason I added this is that at the October Utility Commission meeting, during the chairman's comments, Chair Miller asked how the Utility Commission could be participating in addressing the water system issues and the concerns that they are also all receiving from neighbors. I think that the water line break that happened over the first weekend of ACL in particular really triggered a lot of conversation in the community, more so than almost any of the other ones. I suggested the Utility Commission, they can always take up issues on their own that they want to deal with, but in talking about it with Jonathan Miller, we talked about potentially just having this item on the agenda so that the Utility Commission would have a request from the council to be working on something specific related to the water system. If there's something specific that we'd like for them to already be evaluating, kind of in the same spirit of what we've done tonight, of trying to anticipate what's about to come and start taking steps towards being able to expedite the process. But we don't have the CIP, and that's
I guess
the
that's
thing.
where I am, is I think it's a good effort, a good task for them to engage in, but would it be more fruitful if they had at least a CIP to kind of be working off of, to help them prioritize what to look at?
Right, so my proposed action was to request that they would review the CIP once available.
Oh, okay.
And other public comment related to the water system issue, and provide recommendations regarding prioritization of projects and funding preferences to assist the city council in expediting evaluation and responsive action to address urgent water system issues.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about rest of council, but I'd be fine with that if it's dependent on the CIP.
It just gives them the opportunity, once we've got that, to start moving on it and adding it to their agenda, and know that it would be work that would benefit the council. If we're just gonna keep moving forward without them doing it, I think, that's also our
I
option.
mean, I wouldn't want to slow anything down, but.
Right,
But we can always take action anyway. Your call, your agenda item, but.
I would suggest, based on the action that we took tonight, maybe waiting till next month to see if there's anything specific that we want them to review, once the CIP comes in, because I think that the things that we've just taken action on are gonna give us things to look at next month, and give the council next month action to look at, and potentially bring this back again to see if it needs to be clarified.
And entertain a motion to table to a time specific, if you'd like to do
I
that.
would make a motion to table this agenda item until the next council meeting, regular council meeting.
You have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
You have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye, opposed say no. Amy?
Aye.
Buck?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Gavin? Aye. 4 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Good job. Moving on to agenda item number 13, discussion and possible action to approve a quote from Austech Tree Services for tree trimming services in the city of Rollingwood, and to direct staff to bring back a budget amendment for the services. Recognize Amber Lewis to explain the amendment, or the item.
Thank you. We have noticed that the trees are getting pretty shaggy along the streets. And if you on a typical day, you can just watch trucks go through here, and they're bruising and wounding our oak trees. And so we thought it might be in the best interest of public health and to prevent the spreading of oak wilt, to have the trees trimmed to 16 feet above the street level on the streets. And so Nate had a list from Cary. He shopped it around to several of the agencies on the list. 4 responded, 2 did not end up providing a quote, and then the 2 that are in your packet did provide a quote. We are recommending Austech as they are less than half of what Davy is.
So why 16 feet?
Carrie wrote the RFP.
Because it's
She's from the Arborist.
always been 14 feet in the past.
We could always change that.
City of Austin is 14 feet.
I love that you know that.
Why would I know
I
that?
said I love that you know that.
Oh. Well, I just had my trees trimmed, and I guess that's my biggest concern with this, is that a lot of people in the city are responsible for taking care of their trees on their own, and I think that that's the approach that we should take first, instead of the city coming in. I mean, like, I just had my trees trimmed. There was a tree trimming activity going on in the corner of, right around the corner from me just the other day. Kevin had an arborist over at his house this week.
But, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I think that the city does not need to take on this expense if it is something that, I checked what the requirement was in the city of Austin, and the city of Austin requires people to maintain the trees even in the right-of-way on their property at their expense. And I think that should be our first attempt, is to tell people that this is their responsibility and get them to do it, and then if they don't, then we can come in and do it, and if there's a way to assess that back to the people that don't do it on their own, then I would be for that also.
Do
But
we
I-
have a mechanism to do that? I actually agree with Sarah on this, but I think the reality is there's just so many people that don't maintain anything on their properties in
Yes.
this neighborhood. But I do agree with her, and I think we should look into that. Do we have any mechanism in our code that allows us to enforce anything that she's
We
proposing?
do have that in the code, and it was my thought as well. But if you drive this community, even in my pickup, as I'm driving through the community, I'm like ducking as I'm going under trees. And so I know that, the trees are the responsibility of the homeowners, but at the same time, there's a public health and safety interest in maintaining the trees, similar to the trenching project that the city undertook. I feel like also with the number of staff that we have on board and with already way overloaded plates, to try and send out letters, give them 30 days, maybe some comply, maybe some don't, going through all of that, following up. I felt like maybe this was a good way to reinvest our street sales tax dollars back into the community. So
I get what
I'm
you're
agnostic.
saying, but I think you're also underestimating that these companies, when they come in and cut trees, do not care. And I'm dealing with it right now at my house with one of these companies, I won't mention them by name, that the city of Austin's hired to cut electric lines. And what they were gonna do to my trees and what we agreed to are completely different. And I just think I think you're underestimating how many neighbors are gonna be in here.
I'm not
Yeah.
underestimating.
No, I know. No,
I
I mean,
realize they will.
It will be bad.
Yeah.
It will be bad. It will be equally as bad. So I don't know what the best solution is for this, but I don't think hiring third parties is, personally.
We could send out a letter. I don't want to commit staff to following up on enforcement because I think that's
Okay,
going to be a
then
whole lot of
Staff doesn't have
effort.
to. Can our police, do we have a mechanism for our police department to
Well,
do it?
I have a legal question, because if you're dealing with two homeowners, and this is Charlie, I'm setting you up for a question.
Nice.
Full disclosure. So if you're dealing if you're on a property line and there's a tree on one side and the limb grows over onto the other property owner has the right to cut that limb
Yes,
at the property line.
correct.
So why would that same legal rationale not apply to rights of way?
The cities can go in and trim their rights, just like utilities folks can.
They can, but why? But we're saying the opposite of that. Of like, it's the homeowner's responsibility. I would argue it's the city's responsibility at the curb. I wouldn't do that. I trim my trees that hang over, but legally speaking, I think it is our responsibility.
I'm not
No, we could,
arguing
well,
one way or the other whose responsibility it is. I just think it's gonna be a mess to hire a third party and these yahoos come in and they start cutting people's trees
I don't necessarily.
randomly. And people are gonna come home and it is gonna be,
yeah, and
It's
we have the
not gonna
right
be
to
good.
prohibit encroachments in our right of way, and that would include trees and the limbs and things like that.
Do we have the right to?
It doesn't
Whether-
mean people
to
will
require
whether we
complain.
have the right or not, I just don't know. I mean,
Okay.
the utility company has the right to come clear power lines too, but that doesn't mean that they do it the right way.
Okay, what would a compromise be? I mean,
I don't know.
so Amber and I were standing out looking at a
Yeah.
property the other day, and
Can we hit the hotspots?
and that's where I was going. Like, can we?
Like Rollingwood Drive is pretty obvious, it's overgrown.
I mean, can we go around and check some hot spots and then say, bring somebody in to do the, the 20 things
We
that
could
are.
do that,
Why
we
don't
could also
try to
think
get
on
the
this.
homeowners to do it themselves first. I know years ago we did this, and my husband looked out the window and saw somebody out there trimming the massive, huge, big oak tree in the very front of our yard that hangs over the street. He was livid,
That's fair.
and he was out there in a heartbeat, telling him to
Okay,
stop and
along
get
those
away
lines
and,
then,
you know.
to that point, then maybe the compromise is to identify the hot spots and then approach the homeowner and say, giving you an opportunity to do it to your liking as long as it meets, 12 feet, 14 feet, whatever that number is. If you don't, then we're gonna have to come in for health and safety reasons and do it ourselves. And then if somebody just lays down and says, I'm not gonna do it, you do it, then we can do it, but I didn't understand that was, I understand your point now.
It sounds like maybe with some direction coming back next month with
Yeah.
more focused plan.
Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. We can issue letters citywide and, we could evaluate and see if we're getting some compliance. And then if we feel like we still need to bring this back for public health and safety, we will. How about that?
I don't even know that you'd need to do the city.
I think we just need to hit the hotspots. They're pretty obvious what they are around
Right.
town when you drive.
And I
So
don't know that we
Rollingwood
need
Drive.
to do the
Well,
cost
I mean,
of.
if you send it to everybody, then nobody has to check which houses are
We could do a Swift
affected.
reach too.
But yeah, you
Yeah.
can do it in the water bill, which is
Mhm.
fine. But I think we need to actually, from a city standpoint, narrow it down to the hotspots.
Yeah, I guess my deal is if you just send it out to the masses, people aren't gonna read that.
Yeah.
If you identify the hot spots and focus on those targets, then you can have a dialogue and.
I think there's a public comment potentially about this issue.
Well, we will entertain public comment in our town hall meeting, especially from Dave. Good to see you in person,
Great to be here.
fellow resident.
I thought you'd like to just have another look at me, see what I look like.
There you go.
Um,
Identify yourself if you would, Dave.
David Bench, 1 Randolph Place. We have a stand of trees that is on the edge of Rollingwood Drive, and we have made every attempt to keep it at 14 feet. And I think that just makes it, because most trucks are able to get beneath 14 feet. If we had to go to 16 feet, it would change the whole sculpture of our trees that are on Rollingwood Drive. 2 feet would make a huge difference with these live oaks, just the way they kind of roll. So what I would recommend here is before anybody does anything else, you establish what that height requirement is. Before anybody starts cutting anything or sending letters out or anything like that, establish what that height, I believe we're at 14 feet right now, but I know that 16 will make a big difference. And so would 12, but regardless, 14 is pretty good. That's a pretty good number.
Our code states 14.
Yeah.
I was relying on Carrie's.
Yeah.
Well, I'm for some flexibility too. If it's on a low, a street that's not traveled and you have a large limb that's at 13 and a half, like, I'm not suggesting we go.
That's the problem with hiring a third party to do it.
Right, true.
I'm tag teaming your public comment tonight.
Absolutely. Let's open her up.
So Kevin Shell, 300 Pleasant Drive, I agree with everything he just said. My trees have always been cut back to the 14-foot, so if I had to go higher, they'd be bad. I'm an absolute offender about this right now in a hot spot, so this is kind of a big deal. Historically, the city has sent out letters about this. When I knew I was on the naughty list, took action on it. I would be pretty damn upset for the same reasons that Buck brought up, that if I just looked out there and somebody's cutting the trees, I'd be, the good old boy in me would probably come out and it would be unpleasant. Granted, city, I understand it's right, but in the heat of the moment, I wouldn't see it that way. The other thing I want to raise awareness to is, as Sarah mentioned, I did have an arborist out today. Different topic, but I do have active oak wilt on the neighboring property. Another reason why I'd be super sensitive to this, if somebody was just going down the line cutting trees, I would be like, wait a minute, what the hell are you doing? You just whacked my neighbors where I know this is active. I mean, me and the surrounding neighbors, we're spending, I'm not as bad as my neighbors, but someone's spending thousands of dollars a year on maintenance for this oak wilt issue. So if it came another way, I'd be sensitive about that. And just an idea would be an opportunity, sending out a letter to let people know this is a problem, do something about it. It's just another opportunity to raise awareness, get an arborist to look out, take a look at the trees, and maybe do something about this. I recognize there's issues with people not reading things, but when we got an opportunity about oak wilt, we might want to take a chance with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, somebody have a motion? I'm good with the letter. I'm good with Amber coming back in a month, and we don't even have to take action if you don't want.
Yeah.
I just instruct staff to come back in a month with a different course of action.
A report.
Well, we have till the end of January for people to get in there and trim their trees up. So we don't want to postpone a letter too long because we want to make sure people have time to take care of it while it's safe.
And we'll make sure it's 14 feet.
And the services are 2 months behind now on getting out, so people need some leeway to get it done.
We could take action. I mean, if y'all want to.
But people probably have some services already in the queue. We're actually scheduled for November 11th, so.
What do y'all want to do?
Do you need us to make a motion for you to?
No,
Okay.
I got it. Letter,
Okay, we're
14 feet, easy peasy.
Yeah, I like the letter now because I need to call and get in the queue. So, just reminding people, now is the time to call and get in the queue.
Get in the queue.
Because you have this many months left to get this addressed before we are in.
And so are we agreeing that staff has the ability to go ahead and send that letter before we come back next month? We don't need to look at it? Do we need a motion on
No,
that?
we don't.
Okay,
It's an administrative action.
okay. Good?
Trim
Good.
your trees or the hammer gets dropped.
The guillotine.
That's right. Okay.
Just a clarification, do we have an arborist currently addressing the city's trees? Or did this bid include the city's trees?
Yes, this included the city's trees.
So do we need to get a separate bid so that the city is also in compliance?
Possibly. Let me talk to Public Works.
Okay.
Public Works did a
Good
great
thought.
job.
Because we
when
can
I
send
called.
ourselves a letter that
They do a
says
great
get in the
job.
queue.
Just tell people if they don't trim their trees, the city of Austin will, and I guarantee you. Guaranteed.
Okay, going once, going twice. Anything else? You good? All right, moving on from agenda item number 13. Agenda item number 14.
Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
thanks everyone. See you guys. Agenda item number 14, discussion and possible action on a resolution approving budget for the Rolling Wood Community Development Corporation, Rolling Wood, Texas, for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2021, and ending September 30th, 2022. Recognize Amber to tell us about this item.
At the September 9th meeting of our CDC, they passed a budget that was half of what was contemplated in the management of services agreement that they are currently under with the city of Rollingwood. And at the September 15th meeting of the city council, y'all rejected the resolution and asked that they amend their budget consistent with the management services agreement and to have them send that back for council reconsideration. And at the October 14th meeting, they passed their budget consistent with that agreement, and so it's before you today. We did talk through that. I explained that the council was open to having a discussion around what they pay for the management services to the city of Rollingwood, and so they expressed interest in having a conversation around that in a joint meeting, and also talking about how they can help and support the city council in the execution of the comprehensive plan as it relates to the commercial corridor. So we might be putting some of those dates in front of you to see if you're available, but
Wouldn't it just be easier for them to come like to the next city council meeting and talk about it, just make it an agenda
might
item?
be we could
Than
have
trying
a
to
little
coordinate
joint workshop.
everybody's schedule?
Yeah, we could also do
Yeah.
a workshop or
Yeah.
something. I don't know, but yeah. For discussion purposes, I will move to approve a budget for the Rollingwood Community Development Corporation, Rollingwood, Texas, for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2021, and ending September 30th, 2022.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion. I think this is reflective of the budget that we approved for the city. As Amber said, we rejected their budget last time. They were nice enough to amend their budget based on our actions. So I'm good with moving forward. And if we want to have them come to a meeting or I'm open to a joint meeting. I told them publicly at the time that we were fine with having a discussion on the
Good luck
administrative.
scheduling a meeting with Mr. Gavin.
No, I'm good. I'm good. And my main concern last time was that it came up at the 11th and a half hour. And, so
Just busted your chops.
now that we
Only
have a
because
year-
we're trying to schedule a meeting right now for the last week and a half.
Oh yeah, there was that. All right, any other discussion or berating of my butt?
Sorry.
All right, all those in favor say aye, opposed say no. Amy?
Aye.
Buck?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Gavin? Aye. 4 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Moving on to agenda number 15, discussion and possible action on a resolution of the city of Rollingwood to join the state of Texas and political subdivision of the state as a party in the Texas opioid settlement agreement secured by the Office of the Attorney General. I'll recognize Charlie to tell us about this one.
So the Attorney General, well, multiple Attorney Generals in multiple states negotiated an opioid settlement, and the Attorney General for Texas negotiated one for the state of Texas, and they have allocated funds to cities not based on size, but rather based on some formula that I don't understand that is based on the opioid problems within those communities. And the Attorney General Office is asking that cities sign on to that settlement, and I would recommend that you do. Because if you don't sign on to, you're guaranteed to have a little over almost $5,000 if you sign on. If you don't, you have to go through a grant allocation process, and you're not guaranteed to get funds, and it costs you a whole lot more to go through that.
And I assume it's a master settlement agreement that precludes any further suit?
Well, there are a few cities out there right now that have hired private plaintiffs' counsel, and one of the reasons why the AG is trying to encourage as many cities as they can to sign on to this is that gives them better leverage with respect to dealing with that issue.
Yeah.
Be curious how they came up with the allocation, since this would seem to be private medical information that they would not have access to know.
I have no idea.
It was a long, drawn-out lawsuit and settlement, I think.
Yes. So I recommend approval.
I would move to adopt the resolution of the city of Rollingwood to join with the state of Texas and political subdivision of the state as a party in the Texas opioid settlement agreement secured by the Office of the Attorney General.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those, or is there further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye, opposed say no. Amy?
Aye.
Buck?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Gavin? Aye. 4 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Moving on to agenda item number 16, discussion of possible action regarding a policy for guiding joint meetings of the city council, city boards, and city commissions. Ms. Patillo, I believe this is yours.
Yeah, so I had this on the agenda 2 meetings ago, but given the length of the agenda, I kind of noted it. Yes. Over the last couple of months, I've had just a number of different questions come up that relate to kind of how the different boards and commissions and the council come together. And it seems like we've had some different attorney opinions at different times, and so some of it might be attorney opinion, and then some of it I think is more of potentially direction from the council, just on how we kind of want to see our boards and commissions interact with each other and with the council. Are you good? Oh,
Yes, sir.
okay. Do we need executive session?
No, we're good. Thanks for pointing out my inefficiencies over here. I was trying to handle something quietly.
That was the whole hand over my.
Yeah.
Nothing quiet about that.
Carry on.
Okay, so I'm not exactly sure where to start with this other than potentially putting out the questions I have and then asking the city administrator and city attorney to draft a policy proposal based on things that we kind of discuss with these questions, or if it's something where we want to kick it to a working group to help advise us. Initially, I put asking the city administrator and city attorney to help us, guessing that Charlie probably has some guidance from other places, and Amber or Ashley may be able to gather some guidance as well. Like I said, some of the questions are legal, but I have them on here. So the first one that has come up is, are there Texas Open Meetings Act requirements that trigger a requirement for an agenda to be held in a joint meeting between 2 or more city bodies? And so the 2 examples that I have that have come up are if more than 2 council members want to attend a board or commission meeting. Like there was one meeting that I came into, I think it was, I can't remember, it was utility commission meeting, and Sarah and Wendy were already here, and so I had to leave unless one of them left, and then I could come in. There wasn't really any deliberation happening, it was just that we were sitting in the audience. So that's a question I've had of kind of how to handle that. And then we had a situation recently where the RCDC came as a member of, RCDC came and participated as the public during the public comment period of Parks Commission. And then there was conversation that happened. And so in that situation, when there's one board or commission that wants to interact with the other one, do we have options as a council or preference, whether we want to see a workshop or a joint meeting or something like that? Because I think that was a challenging situation for everybody involved. So those would be the first 2 that I guess I would throw out there and see what Charlie may offer. Or
I can give an overview of what the law requires.
okay,
Happy to do that.
great.
So any body subject to the Texas Open Meetings Act, and that is a quasi-judicial body, or a body that has more authority than just a recommendation to city council. So off the top of my head, that's going to be city council, your planning and zoning commission, which by statute is required to comply, zoning board of adjustment, which is a quasi-judicial body, and the RCDC. Those are probably the 4 boards or commissions that are required to comply with the Texas Open Meetings Act by law. Unless you have an ordinance that you've adopted that requires all other boards and commissions to comply with the act, they're not required to comply with the act. The act says that anytime you have a quorum of a governing body, those four that I stated, that where a discussion is being held, I'm kind of paraphrasing that, where a discussion is being held over business which they have control, there has to be compliance with the Texas Open Meetings Act. And compliance with the Texas Open Meetings Act means a properly posted agenda 72 hours in advance, a recording or minutes taken, and then approval of those minutes if minutes are taken. And that's the requirements of the law. So even if you're if you have 3 members of City Council sitting in the audience while the Planning and Zoning Commission is meeting, and the City Council does not have a posted agenda for that, that's a violation of the Texas Open Meetings Act. Even if City Council doesn't say a word, even if no council member says anything. That has to be properly posted in compliance with the Texas Open Meetings Act. I don't recommend that if you have 3 people there, if you have 3 people there, that's a violation of the act. So you can really only have 2 people. So there was a question here about, well, if someone gets up to speak, can one leave and then come back? No, it doesn't matter if you're speaking or not. If you're completely silent, that's a violation of the act if there's a quorum present. That's the law.
Well,
There's not even any gray area in that, so I'm not sure about other attorneys' opinions unless they don't know what they're talking about.
no, I think the question that night was if only 2 of us were present in the room, if one person left, could you change who the 2 people were?
I don't recommend doing that. There's a provision in the statute that says that taking actions to intentionally avoid the requirements of the act is a criminal offense. And so I don't know, how the district attorney would feel about that.
So what are our choices? Like, do we notice that every P&Z, RCDC, and Board of Adjustment could be a joint meeting?
So the cities, 10, 15 years ago, cities started doing this thing called notice of a possible quorum. I personally am not in favor of notices of a possible quorum because at some point, nobody knows whether or not the public doesn't know whether a quorum's going to be present or not. And so they literally would have to show up at every meeting to determine whether or not a quorum was going to be present for the city council. And so I don't recommend that. My recommendation is that you actually not show up at a quorum at another body who you have authority and control over that business. That's my recommendation. So if 2 people are at a Planning and Zoning Commission meeting and another council member walks in, that council member needs to leave.
So how do we have you seen cities set policy on how to kind of decide which of those 2 council members can be there? Like first come, first serve?
The majority of my cities don't have council members attend other commission meetings. And the reason for that is a policy reason that they've adopted, which is all of city council should get all of the information at the same time at the same meeting. And so if you have individual council members going to different meetings, getting information in a different way and in a different forum than the rest of council, that's not, and I'm not speaking for myself, I'm speaking for the other boards and commissions the other cities that do this, is that they believe all of council should get the same information at the same time.
And do they have liaison type positions or they don't do liaison?
I have a few cities that have liaison positions on boards and commissions where a council member, a single council member goes to a board and commission as a liaison, but the liaison is not an active member of the board or commission. They're just there to observe and report back to city council.
That makes sense.
I mean, there are certain circumstances where city council members are members of boards and commissions. RCDC is an example. A city council member could be a member of the RCDC. Or a type B, right? So,
Yes.
3 members of city council. 3 of the members could be members of the RCDC. If you want.
So in you guys as our city attorney are sitting in some of our meetings, but not in all of them.
I think we only sit in the RCDC and this one.
Yeah, and then P&Z.
P&Z and BOA.
Do we? Oh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
So all of those that we've just listed where you could have the issue, y'all are there. So do we need to, I guess the question I've had asked to me is like, do we need to provide more education to our chairs to understand what they would do if there's an Open Meetings Act violation occurring like that, or do we rely on council to?
But the chair
make
of the
that?
body is, and that body is not violating, Planning and Zoning Commission isn't violating the Texas Open Meetings Act.
Mm-hmm.
If 3 members of city council are here. It's the city council members that are violating
I
the
think
Texas
we
Open Meetings
should
Act.
know that we can't have 3 of us there. It
Right, I
shouldn't
think-
be the responsibility of the chairman to kick somebody out.
I mean, if you don't want to adopt a policy where we encourage members of city council not to attend other board and commission meetings, then the policy should be a first come, first serve. First 2 people get there, get to stay. Seems to me that
The
would be a
liaisons
fair
get to
policy.
say, yeah.
Line up like it's a concert.
Right, yeah, yes.
Well, we know I won't be the first.
General admission, rush the stage.
Can we add a rock, paper, scissors? No, I'm just kidding.
Dang it, I'm eliminated. I'll go home.
All right.
Oh, shucks.
What about, so I actually don't know how many people from RCDC came and spoke as a member of the public, but is it,
But the RCDC doesn't have any control over anything the Parks Commission does. There's, the law
So
is,
that was
that
proper.
the law is that the body has to have some control over.
So it's the city
makes
council.
so that's not a Texas Open Meetings Act issue, that's us setting policy to say, like, if a board and commission wants to work with another board and commission,
Yeah, the only
They need to
exception I
go-
would think would be is if off the top of my head, if the Parks Commission is having a conversation about trying to make an application to the RCDC to utilize funds for improvements to the park, then the RCDC, there should not be a quorum of RCDC at that
Because
meeting.
then they'd have control.
Because they have control.
okay.
But we could all pile into the Parks Commission meeting because that's not a quasi judicial.
No, because, I'm assuming that the Parks Commission is making recommendations to city council for purposes of y'all making, transacting business.
Okay, I misunderstood what you said earlier.
Yeah, I was thinking that we could all attend Parks Commission.
Y'all
If
have
we were just
control
sitting.
over all the business, over all of your boards and commissions. You cannot have a quorum at any of those.
But Parks Commission doesn't have to comply with open.
No,
That's
yeah,
what, that's
yeah,
what
yes, that's right. The Parks Commission does not.
Okay, so that, we still have to
But
comply.
we still have to.
But you
because we
still have to, yes, that's right.
Okay, so if RCDC is going to
Sorry for
parks,
the
they still have to comply with not having a
that's right.
quorum present
Right.
at parks unless it's been done that way. Okay.
I mean,
Alright.
probably some training on that, this has been informative for us too. Probably some basic training on all of that for everyone would be helpful.
Yeah, I wonder if, I asked Charlie about it a couple months ago, and one suggestion he had is he could do like an hour-long workshop that.
I mean, we all have to do that AG class.
Or what about just send like a 1-page memo on it?
Yeah, that's really what I was thinking.
Well, we are going to have new council members regardless of how it turns out. There will be new people here starting next month, and that might be something that we could have an hour before the
Yeah.
council meeting, just,
And we
and
could
it-
post,
and invite people from the other boards and
Yeah.
commissions to come and hear that too, so everybody gets the same training on what
And I can double
What
check,
is
our
legit?
presentation that we had prepared complied with the requirements and was approved by the AG for the training purposes.
Oh,
So, you may,
For what?
I just have
I
to
don't have
double
to take
check.
the test.
Right, you don't have
That
to,
would be great.
you don't have to listen to the violins. I have to double check and see if that's still the case, cause it expires, so I don't know where we're at in that process, but I can double check that.
I think that'd be a great idea, and we could post, everyone could post for that.
They could,
Right.
yes, absolutely.
And that's the answer to your number 2, I think, Amy.
is,
Because we can always post, you can always post for joint meetings.
right, well, I
Yes,
wondered,
sure.
because Board of Adjustment is it's like quasi-judicial,
It is.
so can the council hold a joint meeting with Board of Adjustment?
Yes, but I'm not sure why you
Why
want.
would we want to?
Well, it would
That
be if
sounds
we had
terrible.
I guess if it's a work session.
Yeah.
If it's
I
a
mean,
work
well,
session, it's not a
but-
joint meeting then.
So that's a weird question. I mean, it's not a weird question. Just off the top of my head, so you don't have any, like, No, I guess kind of you do, because you adopt the rules and regulations that the Board of Adjustment is then granting variances to. So y'all would still have to have a joint meeting. But I'm not sure why you'd want to have a joint meeting with we'd have to just talk about that, because it is a quasi judicial body, and you can't remove them for any reason. They've got specific rules and procedures they have to follow that are state law, and what they give variances to specific property owners who are requesting the variances, and the special exceptions where you have adopted the special exception process for them. So I'm not sure what.
Because most of what they're ruling on is statutory.
It's all, and ordinances that you've already adopted. But I could see and would encourage a joint meeting with RCDC, especially for purposes of determining goals and objectives, where you want your RC dollars spent, so that y'all have alignment with respect to that, and you get a budget that aligns with those expectations.
Yeah, I actually posed the question more because I was posing, when I was started asking the question of joint meetings, I added the question of, are there any limitations on joint meetings?
There's no limitations other than making sure we comply, both bodies
Right.
comply with the Open Meetings Act if they're both obligated to do so under the law.
But it probably wouldn't be recommended to have a joint meeting with Board of Adjustment, like you're saying. So I threw it out there as an example.
Other than
of one.
training, like,
The
it
training,
might be a good
okay.
idea for city council to see any training that's given to the zoning board of adjustment, so the city council knows and understands the roles and obligations that they have under the law.
Do we do that? Do we ever do a training for BOA?
We haven't, we have one, possibly on the agenda for November the 4th. And, they are just adopting their rules of procedure, and so we would have, after they adopt that, we would also have a training.
And this legislative session, there was a change to what can be considered for a variance. So we're probably gonna need to bring back an amendment to make that change anyway, and probably a good time to have that discussion.
Yeah.
That training. Yeah, that's interesting for the training. So I think the last question is actually not an Open Meetings Act. It's the number 3. It's what is our process for initiating a joint meeting of 2 or more city bodies? So I think in the past it's just kind of happened naturally, where the chair of one group says, like, we want to talk with this other group, and it happens. But I think just looking at it from a leadership perspective, are there some policies that we might want to put in place that, as a council, that say, this is how we want it to happen? And granted, the council composition is about to change, so it may make more sense to wait another month to have that conversation and see kind of what the new council composition wants to do about that. Because I don't have it on here, but there might be some preferences of a workshop versus a joint meeting, just based on scheduling and the different requirements for that. So I don't know that I necessarily have action right now. It sounds like maybe looking at the option of Charlie doing the Open Meetings Act course for us would be helpful.
Yeah,
I think it's more helpful to be able to actually ask specific questions versus watching that thing where it's like, you're just watching it so you can.
Check the box.
Right, yeah, and I feel like this would be much more interactive, and probably we would get a lot more out of it. And we would make sure that everybody had the same information. So it sounds like that might be something that would
I
be
agree.
productive.
I don't think you need a motion on that, do you?
No.
Any other discussion on this item?
I would say, I would just encourage kind of the next body to maybe look at some of those questions and just set some precedent for what the hopes are for boards and commissions if they're wanting to collaborate.
And I would just ask Charlie, I suspect that's not covered in your presentation, if you might just make a mental note to at least mention it to the broader group if we all meet.
I think I missed what I'm supposed to mention.
This discussion that we just had about
Right. Joint meetings?
joint meetings
Joint
and-
meetings.
and quorums of bodies that oversee other bodies. Okay, any other discussion?
That's it.
Any other action items? Hearing none, we will leave agenda item 16 with without action, and move to agenda item number 17, discussion of possible action regarding the Riley Page Stratford Transportation Infrastructure updates. Ms. Patillo.
So Amber, I think, actually has
Oh, I'm sorry,
more of
Amber.
the update here.
Yes, let me pull up my one-sheeter. Okay, at the June council meeting, the council directed the police department to install some temporary, devices that would prohibit a left turn onto Page Riley at the Stratford intersection, on weekends. The city of Austin heard about that, and they were concerned about the safety of that solution because it was past the intersection. It was where we have control of the road. And so staff, with, Wendy and Amy's kind of blessing, said we'll look at a proposal that would be mutually beneficial. They agreed the intersection was problematic as well. And so, what we have done is work together on a design, for improvements at that intersection. One improvement that they were forging ahead without us on was a three-way stop there. They have sight distance issues that they're trying to correct with the three-way stop. And so in addition to that, there will be a prohibited left turn lane. It won't be permanent. It will be considered temporary. It will be done with tape. It'll be marked that way. And so the plan is completed, and it was completed right before ACL, and so the decision was made to not install prior to ACL, wait until that event was over, and then they would work on the installation of those devices. They will put up warning signs, like every week to prepare for these traffic controls to be installed in the near future. So that's where we're at with that.
So it'll be a total of 4 new stop signs?
2.
It is showing four.
I think the other ones are stop sign ahead signs, if I was reading it right.
Oh, gotcha.
Oh, that one on the bottom, the furthest to the bottom, it says it's the existing sign that's gonna be removed. So they're just moving that
Oh.
one
yeah.
up.
There we are reading words again. Helpful. Okay.
I wanna commend Amber and Chief for really, jumping into what was for a moment there kind of a stressful, combination of circumstances, and really working with the city of Austin to resolve this, because they had, they actually, at the meeting that we talked about doing this diverter, they had actually started working on a three-way stop without telling us. And so part of the stress point was then when we had the motion to start working on the temporary diverters, they were really stressed out because they had started the engineering already on a three-way stop. So I think the solution kind of incorporates both ideas, and it sounds like, from what I've heard, all the neighbors are willing to, on all the sides there, are willing to see what happens. And I went back and double checked with some of the residents who are in Rollingwood, who are right there close by, and they still want this.
They blessed this plan?
I don't know if they have seen this plan. Do you know if they've seen this, Amber?
I don't think they've seen the final plan, but I know the city of Austin has reached out to those neighbors, along that intersection.
Including ours? Not just.
I know that the neighbors that I talked to who are on the Rollingwood side had seen a schematic, and I don't know if it was this exact one or if it was one before it, but it included the three-way stop.
Okay.
And it included kind of narrowing the intersection, and they were still wanting anything that would reduce both the
So
flow.
some level of communication at least.
Yeah, yeah. I did get a phone call from a colleague of mine who was representing the neighbors on the north side, of Stratford, several weeks ago, who had not been included in the conversation, but my understanding is that they have since been looped in. They were first contacted about the fact that they were gonna have some new signposts in their front yard. And, at least my understanding is they're willing to see what happens, and so this is where we are.
Okay.
And they were invited to come tonight. I made sure the City of Austin neighbors knew we had it on the agenda. My colleague who is representing the people on the north side, and I let Mayor Anthony in Westlake Hills know, and I let one of her constituents who was concerned about this previously know that we had this on the agenda.
Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I think it's a good idea, all for it, but when we do this temporary, are we gonna put a control in place to check to see if all the traffic is gonna be diverted onto Ashland? Because if we just move the problem down to there, we're routing traffic through an even more dangerous part of the city, with the hill on Hadley, which is to the east of Ashland. I mean, that's, other than Edge Grove, that's the worst place to walk or have to bike in the neighborhood.
We did take prior data with our counters. We bought some new counters with this motion and took some data prior to, so we will be looking at that.
But under this proposal, you're not closing down.
It's just the left-hand turn on, so it prevents people leaving the park from going through Riley, on Riley and out on Collingwood.
But once the apps figure this out, they're gonna route everybody to Ashland or to,
Ridgewood.
And both of those, if the goal is to get the MOPAC, which is most of the traffic we don't want, it's just gonna route that traffic through the center of the city. If it's dispersed enough, it won't be a problem. But I think we just ought to have data to make sure that.
Yeah, I
We
think
just
it's
didn't
a
move
possibility. Yeah, I think it's a possibility. I would say that this particular street took a significant amount of impact because of the presence of that, of what's become a de facto 1,000-car parking lot. And during the pandemic, you would see people gather there all day and then kind of empty out at the same time. One thing that the city of Austin did do that I think, at least, I mean, talking with the neighbors, they're still experiencing the volume and the speeds. And I stood there for an hour and talked with some neighbors right there, and the speeds of the cars coming through is unbelievable. I mean, unbelievable. So they still feel like, even with what City of Austin has done, is they, for a while there, they didn't have parking over on the other side of Barton Springs. Like the only large parking lot in the park was the gravel lot on Stratford. So there has been some parking that's moved over to the other side. And that, the main thing that did is there were just not quite as much of the density of the line of cars coming out, but it's still, the volume is still really high, that's coming through there. So I do think the apps are gonna reroute people. The City of Austin's also said they're gonna look at adjusting the light and potentially putting in a full right-hand turn lane right there with the existing space, so that it's not just that little short turn. I think that will really help.
That would make a huge difference.
It would make a huge difference, yeah, so.
That's probably the real solution.
I think there's a number of things, but the City of Austin wanted to actually move forward on the three-way stop, so they were wanting to address the intersection with that. So we're at least gonna do that, and then, see whether this no left turn, like kind of what the impact is, and whether it's a good long-term solution, or one that is just one that's been tried and may mess with the algorithms for a little bit.
Are they still putting a center stripe? Down here, it doesn't show it on here,
The center stripe on Stratford.
on Riley.
People are less likely to go.
They talked about putting the center, because we talked about that for a speed reduction, is having the center stripe down where they're putting if they're putting striping in there already, we had talked about having them put the center stripe all the way down to Hadley.
Oh, that's right.
Okay, any further discussion, any action? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to agenda item number 18, discussion and possible action regarding the Zilker Park Vision Plan updates. Amber, do you want to start us off, and then Amy, if you have anything to add?
I can take it
Or
really
take it,
quickly.
yeah.
Yeah, sure. So Amber actually helped me with, there's 2 sheets in here. There's, the first one is the one that Amber helped put together a really good summary for me, which is really kind. And basically, she and I have kind of been tag teaming on monitoring what is happening. She's gone to neighborhood association meetings, and been talking with PARD and continued to ask for them to give us an individual meeting. So we did have one individual meeting where they kind of gave us a preview of what they might present at this week's community forum, and it was shocking a little bit, some of the transportation ideas that were being proposed as ideas that seemed really contrary to messaging that we've received from CTRMA and City of Austin in the past about what roadway surfaces could be placed near Zilker Park. So we asked a lot of questions about that. One of the things, I would say a big picture thing that the Zilker Vision Plan seems to be trying to work on is removing the parking from the Zilker Park area and removing roadways, and then adding a transit option. So if you want to be at the park, you take transit, and then moving the parking to our shared parking garages that surround the park. So they have the Endeavor parking garages labeled as ones that would potentially be used for weekend and off-hour parking.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So last night we had the candidate forum, so I didn't get to actually watch what they ended up presenting during the presentation. It's almost 2 hours. So my second sheet is what I added this afternoon late. I have the link to where you can go and watch the 3rd community meeting. I would suggest that every person in Rollingwood go and watch this meeting. There are times when I'm watching planning where you think, there's not that much happening here. I would say now is the time for everyone in Rollingwood to go and watch this, and potentially I have a lot of suggestions for potentially having different boards and commissions. Someone on that board of commission throughout our city should be watching it and talking about what impacts that might have to different areas of our city. So, I mean, one of the other things that's in this is diverting Stratford. So Stratford no longer connects to Barton Springs, and it instead diverts underneath the Mopac Bridge on 2 sides, which would effectively create just a loop through Rollingwood, and would take up space that we've been told in the past during the Mopac planning process can't be used because of the federally protected species and the permitting requirements that would be required to add concrete in that area. So I don't know if these ideas are ridiculous or not, but they were fully discussed, and there was a lot of Q&A that I was trying to scan through quickly this afternoon. And my suggestion would be that we spend a little bit of money right now as a city, having the city engineers watch the part of the meeting that relates to the transportation, and also have Bickerstaff, who we have on, looking at Mopac South and kind of already understand all of our transportation issues, review it, and start helping us kind of filter through what things probably need a response and what things are probably not necessary to respond to. I would suggest that the Parks Commission have somebody on it that is reviewing this, because the transformation of uses that they're talking about for Zilker Park would potentially impact then how people might try to look for our, like, what they would be then looking for to our park to do instead. If suddenly you can't be like a mom in your car with your kids and your dog and drive to Zilker Park and park there and get out and enjoy that space, then those moms are gonna come to our park because they can still they can still park in our parking lot and get out with their dog and their kid. And I love to be hospitable with our park, but we potentially are gonna have a new level of use of our park if there's certain things that happen with this vision plan moving forward and then actually happening. And I mean, like, some of this stuff is probably ridiculous. Like, there was a question asked about, they're doing a fiscal analysis of closing Barton Springs completely, Barton Springs Road. That seems like an outlier possibility, but it's something that's being done.
Who's driving this plan? Like, is there a department? I mean, it sounds like the whole city council. I mean,
It's the Zilker, so there's a,
That's typical.
yeah. So I will say that until this presentation, nothing really has triggered me. I've kind of been like, okay, they're gonna like add some signage. They're gonna think about taking some of the environmental issues that exist and actually addressing them. It seemed like, you know, in creating a more cohesive identity for the park. So these transportation, they said that what they're doing, what they explained to Amber and I, is they're throwing out all the ideas and then letting the community say what they think about them. But they haven't even really been vetted. I feel like some of them haven't even been fully vetted to see if they're feasible. So it's a little bit like the hard thing is,
throw them out there if they're not planning on doing them in some capacity. They're looking at doing these on another level.
yeah,
I mean, just based on the history of the city of Austin and how they currently operate in that council, somebody's looking into all of that. It wasn't just, they just threw it out there for public notice, but somebody's looking into it behind the scenes. I mean, you gotta think about it from their standpoint. To the west is Rollingwood, which isn't part of their city, so if they do close Barton Springs, it really doesn't have any impact on them,
right.
right? It has
Right.
an impact on us. And they're gonna say, well, you guys
that's
aren't
one of the-
taxpayers of the city of Austin, we don't care.
One of the major access points to get into Rollingwood.
Right.
They close Barton Springs, it's like,
Right.
I
So
know.
yeah, I agree. There's some parts of it that seem fantastical, but I think it's worth
It's
having.
worth exploring.
It's worth
We need to
exploring.
hire
and
we need to get these consultants on
what
board.
I'll
for
just
us.
say that I feel like we have people who are ready to come on and actually watch the meeting and itemize all the issues that are discussed. Help us at least have a format so that we can go through and identify which ones we might want to comment on and what legal issues might be presented by any of them that we want to address. But also just for RCDC to also be in, I think Parks Commission and RCDC are probably the two primary boards and commissions I identified when I was scanning through things today. It may also be worth having a workshop where we can let people in the community know, please go and watch this presentation. We're gonna have a workshop where we're gonna hear feedback from the community. The city of Rollingwood's gonna work on presenting a position. You also can comment on your own. But I do think that this is probably the time to engage more of our community in really looking at it and understanding what we're gonna do. I mean, like, they're talking about repurposing the clubhouse potentially as a visitor center where it would have daily traffic of people coming to visit.
I will
the
say
park.
Mayor
I mean,
Dyson, like 18 months ago, brought
He did.
all this stuff
He
up,
did.
that this could be potential issues, and everybody in the community pretty much laughed at it, and now it's like, it's out in the open.
Mhm.
And I don't know.
Okay.
So, I don't know what, I guess I need to, do we need to do administrative, Charlie, or should I make a motion for this to direct spending?
Yeah, this sounds like something that would, because this isn't even a
It's
city.
not budgeted.
Yeah.
It's not, okay. Do we, I mean, I suppose, I guess the question is, can we use some of our MOPAC budget for Bickerstaff towards this? Or is it something that, we could hire, or we can have Charlie's firm take on? I feel like some of the legwork here, I mean,
I don't know that we could use the MOPAC money for this, since it was advertised as a project through our CDC
Right.
properly, but we could find money in the city budget for this.
This is really important. We gotta have consultants or lawyers or
Mhm.
whoever looking out on our behalf. This was brought up 18 months ago, and now it's like coming to light. It's pretty aggravating, honestly.
yeah. The thing that, I will say, before I make the motion, Amber and I were asked how we thought Rolling would react, and both of us kind of said that's not something we can say during this meeting. I think we're gonna have to have our community review what you actually present, which happened last night, and we can all go watch it now. The thing I did encourage them and remind them of is that the city of Rollingwood is not a neighborhood of the city of Austin. We are actually an independent city. And so we can make decisions that their neighborhoods can't make. And we have a budget that's different than their neighborhoods. That said, one of the things I said to them was, our curbs are not for sale. And so if you're setting policies that effectively remove all the parking from Zilker Park, and the closest free parking is our city, we don't, my feeling is people didn't buy homes in Rollingwood to then have to go to the permit parking year-round system that the neighborhoods in the city of Austin have. And that I explained to them that we do that temporarily for some special events, but all of our administrative costs of creating those temporary permitting solutions and also addressing the safety issues that come from a lot of pedestrians using our city who aren't normally here, those are all getting covered by the events that are happening there. And I also mentioned to them that we have a city budget that is less than the cost of some of the homes that have sold during the pandemic as single-family homes. And we do not have budget, nor will we be accepting a plan that suddenly creates a parking lot in Rollingwood because they want to remove that parking from Zilker Park. So those were some statements I made that I felt pretty comfortable based on 6 years of being part of conversations to make. If I was incorrect in any of those, people can correct me later or address that. But that was basically the position I took was we're actually a city, we're not a neighborhood. And we are not willing to become the parking lot of Zilker Park. And I have concerns about.
What did they say that?
One of the people was nodding, the others listened to me. I don't know.
They understood. They got the message. Amy was firm with them that that this is the way it's gonna be, and don't come at us with anything less than that. And so, like, happy to work with you, but no.
But we're not gonna be the parking lot. And I also pointed out that Rollingwood Drive is a residential street, and so one of the proposals was to re-divert Barton Springs through the middle of, like, whatever that road is now that kind of goes through the middle of, that's not Barton Springs, and that would connect, whatever it is that connects directly with Rollingwood Drive. So
Yeah.
they would divert Barton Springs instead to connect directly. So you would create an intersection for Barton Springs that then flows directly into Rollingwood Drive. And I felt
And it would be all the school buses and things like that going through there.
I felt comfortable saying this is a residential street. Again, we're not the city of Austin, so we're not willing to tolerate you creating this as a thoroughfare. And there's a bunch of driveways that back onto it, and that's, like, I couldn't see our community wanting that to be the solution either. So what I would say is, I think this is the point where, like, it would be really valuable, because those are the things that I communicated, but those were just based on me feeling like those are things I understand about our community values. I think it would be valuable now to have some outside help us put together a list of the issues that we probably want to address from their ideas, and
I agree.
what the options are.
Let's make a motion.
Cool, I'm good. All right. But I did want to let everybody know. Those are the things I said.
Yeah, that was really good, thank you.
Sure. And then I kind of apologized to Amber, because I said later, I was like, well, you've been asking them for this meeting, and then I kind of told them, we want to work with you, but we're not going to do that. So I hope that we can continue to have good dialogue. But my motion would be to request that the city engineer and Bicker staff review relevant portions of the Zilker Vision Community Meeting number 3, related to transportation and other ideas that would potentially impact Rollingwood, in association with other transportation issues in the city of Rollingwood's positions regarding MOPAC South, and would request that the Park Commission evaluate the ideas presented in the Zilker Vision Community Meeting number 3 for impacts to the parks in the city of Rollingwood. Would request that the RCDC evaluate the ideas presented in the Zilker Vision Community Meeting number 3 for any impacts to the commercial corridor in the city of Rollingwood. And would request that the mayor schedule a workshop type format meeting within the next month to review the ideas presented in Zilker Vision Community number 3 and gather comments from residents to inform a position from the city of Rollingwood regarding the Zilker Vision plan.
A second. It is.
All right, you have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion?
Amber, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. Do you want the workshop, you want it to run concurrently with our CDC evaluating, Park Commission evaluating, and the city engineer and Bicker staff evaluating?
Oh, that's a good question.
Or would you like them all to evaluate first and then hold a workshop?
Maybe we
I
just,
think that would be more useful
yeah,
if we have their input
Okay.
first.
okay, so maybe within the next 2 months, I would
Yeah.
amend my motion to say within the next 2 months, schedule a workshop.
Okay.
And I would just encourage everybody who cares about kind of transportation and use issues and how our city interrelates with the city of Austin to go and listen to the meeting.
Okay, any other further discussion? Heard the motion in the second. All those in favor say aye, opposed say no. Amy?
Aye.
Buck?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Gavin? Aye. Being 4 ayes, no nays, motion carries. Before we leave this, I'm gonna say to staff, we probably should have a somewhat recurring
Okay.
agenda item
Sure.
to
A
discuss.
standing item.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 19, discussion and possible action to review applications and make appointments to the Park Commission, Utility Commission, RCDC, Planning and Zoning Commission, and the Board of Adjustments. Amber?
Ashley?
Oh, sorry, Ashley, I didn't
Sorry,
see you
y'all.
over there.
We just have one opening on the Planning and Zoning Commission at this time. If you look in the packet, we do have, looks like 4 applications, kind of ranging in dates going all the way back to September 2020.
Okay, hold on, let me find this. All right, do we have any discussion on this item?
We can appoint Dave now, right?
We've
With the
tried to do it
residency?
many
I mean,
times
my gosh, I'm
before.
sitting here, I'm like, is anyone gonna make a motion?
I've already made it.
Poor Dave.
I'm not liaison to planning. and
We've
zoning.
put him on hold so many times.
Oh my gosh.
He's tried to volunteer. He's tried to do it all for so long. Dave, tonight's your big night, man.
Do I get a badge?
Tenacity badge. Go ahead.
No, I'm deferring to a liaison from planning and zoning.
Well,
That
there's
would
two
be
of
you
us,
or Sarah.
So I move to appoint David Bench to the open position on planning and zoning.
I'll second. Any further discussion on Mr. Bench?
Thank you.
Thank
Know him well. We're happy to finally get to roll you on here. Thanks for sticking with it for so long.
I hope you're pleased with your decision. I will do my best to make that so.
Yeah. You've heard the motion and the second. All those in favor say aye, opposed say no. Amy?
Hi.
Buck?
Aye.
Sarah?
Aye.
Gavin, aye. 4 ayes, no nays, motion carries. We do still have some good folks on here. We have some new ones. Kevin, notice that you're on here now. Welcome to the list. Look forward to getting you rolled in sometime. We'll let Dave get his legs under him and then, or somewhere else. I like the fact that you signed up for all of it too. We got 4 different options for Kevin someday. Okay, with that, we'll move on to agenda item number 20. Standing agenda item, update discussion, possible action to pass a resolution, request a meeting with, to provide information or statement of position of the city to, and or request for information or analyses from relevant state and local officials in connection with the proposed South Mopac expansion. Amy, anything new on this one?
Nothing that I have to report. The thing that I was thinking about though is I think it might be helpful to have on the city website, to have a dedicated web page that has all of the different position papers and responses that we've gotten over the years available in one place. Because I had somebody ask me the other night if all of the information about MOPAC is just in my head, and I was able to say, actually, no, we've taken a lot of time to draft a lot of letters. And so if somebody hasn't been following along actively during the process, they can go and read the letters and get up to speed and feel like that they can participate. And so I know that we've had agenda items where we've included all of those letters attached multiple times, but we don't have kind of one dedicated place on the website that we could direct people to. And I think that would be helpful as it restarts too, to have kind of one place that people can go to.
Okay. I think that's a good suggestion. I think it's administrative in nature. Amber, Ashley, do you have that?
Yes.
Okay. And that may be, maybe not for now, but that might, as we get into this Zilker vision, you might want to be thinking about keeping all of that in one spot too.
You got it.
Okay, with that, we will exit agenda item 20. Direct everyone's attention to the reports, which are items 21 through 31. Those are available for the public and anyone else for viewing. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A motion to adjourn,
Second.
many seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
When you pull it up, where is that from?
You don't even need the dressing.
I've never, so is it the seared tuna?
Yeah,
Okay, I'm gonna have to,
it's like freakishly good.
I'm gonna add that, I think John would enjoy that too.